See that drifting south during the evening, and during the early hours that will tend to sit across the Midlands and East Anglia. Showers along the south coast will continue to affect the far southeast. Otherwise, it's a dry night for most, with clear spells towards Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. And here, a chilly start, -3 or 4 Celsius, but there will be some dense fog around because we've got light winds as well, and this ridge of high pressures to start things on Tuesday. That, for most, will bring a fine start to the day, a break in all the wet and windy weather that we've seen during the last few weeks and months. But there will be some of that dense fog around. Some low cloud, predominantly across central and eastern England, but elsewhere, fog patches tending to lift and skies will brighten. Scotland, northern and western England, Wales and Northern Ireland seeing sunny spells and highs of 10 or 11 Celsius. But where we do see some fog and low cloud persisting, 3 to 6 Celsius is more likely. So a chilly day to come in places, 1 or 2 showers, never too far away from the far southeast. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking dry. That is until this area of rain moves in, and that will affect parts of Northern Ireland during Wednesday. It never makes much further progress east because high pressure builds and turns drier everywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is GB News. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on TV, radio and online. Let's kickstart your week. So, Tory MPs have finally kicked off about migrant hotels. 50 of them have written to the Prime Minister. We might be bringing the military in to cover the NHS strikes. And Matt Hancock comes third on I'm a Celeb. Have you forgiven him for his COVID calamities? Our top story today, breaking as we speak, is that hundreds of migrants have crossed the Channel in small boats today after a lull due to bad weather. It comes as we're finally seeing 50 Tory MPs saying enough is enough now. They've written to the Prime Minister demanding a legal change to stop illegal immigrants abusing our asylum system. But why has it taken them this long? Amid concerns as well for public health and safety. We'll talk about that later. Are we really bringing the military in to cover for our NHS strikes? The Colonel will see you now, eh? I want to get to the bottom of these strikes. Are nurses' demands unreasonable? Both the Tories and Labour seem to think so. We, as patients, you and I and everyone we know, have a right to know if they are bang out of order. I'll be speaking to a member of the Health Select Committee to get you the answers that you need. And Little Matty Hancock. He came third on I'm a Celeb. I think, given the care home scandal, he shouldn't really be given the chance to resuscitate his career, but he's clearly won millions of people over.
Just wanted to show what I'm just like as a person. People have, lots of people come to me with preconceived ideas.
Did we need to know what Matt Hancock was like as a person? I don't know. Mixed views on this, people. Mixed views. Let me know your thoughts. Email me. We've got two big ones for you that I want to hear from you on directly today in that email address that our TV viewers can see on their screens right below me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Do you say no to more migrant hotels? And have you forgiven Matt Hancock? gbviews@gbnews.uk. But before that, it's your latest headlines.
Good afternoon to you. It's 3 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. More than 50 Conservative MPs have signed a letter urging the Prime Minister to introduce emergency legislation to ease the migrant crisis. The group says, firstly, people should be more rapidly returned to safe countries they've come from. And secondly, when claims are made that people have unwillingly been trafficked to the UK, they should be sent back without objection. MPs, including Sir Graham Brady and Esther McVeigh, say the amendments would make a strong deterrent for those thinking of crossing the Channel. GB News sources say more than 450 people have been intercepted on 9 small boats so far today. The MP, David Davis, is the author of the letter, and he says this could send migrants home within days.
So if we got the gumption to do it with all new arrivals from a safe country, I don't mean from Syria or Afghanistan, where they may have a claim, but from a safe country, then frankly, it should knock out almost all of the 12,000 a year that we're looking at the moment.
National Grid could pay households to cut their power usage for the first time tomorrow in a bid to avoid blackouts. The operator's warning outages at a nuclear power plant in France has put pressures on supplies, and it might need to use its new demand flexibility service. Households may be asked to reduce their usage at certain times in the day and will be paid for any reductions they make. A decision is expected imminently. We'll bring it to you right here on GB News. The government's launching a £1 billion scheme to make middle-income homes more energy efficient. The 3-year scheme will see hundreds of thousands of homes receive loft and cavity wall insulation from the spring. Households that don't currently get support to upgrade their homes will be prioritised, whilst a fifth of the funding will be set aside for the most vulnerable. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, told us the measures will help households reduce their energy consumption.
This £1 billion, which is in addition to a lot more money that's been provided previously, is to allow anyone in any kind of housing, could be private rent, it could be their own home, could be social housing, to improve the property in order to make sure that it meets those higher standards. And that will save people, quite a lot of money.
The Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, told GB News Labour wants to insulate 19 million homes as soon as possible.
It's about 10 years too late. I mean, this should have been a quick early win for the government, reducing people's fuel bills and doing the right thing by the environment. I mean, it's a win-win. Why has it taken so long? This government have neither the ambition or the direction. Of course, I welcome when they come a little bit onto our territory, whether it's a windfall tax or greater energy efficiency ambition, but they've got nowhere near the comprehensive programme they need to get this country onto the right path.
I promised I'd give you an update. Well, here it is. Breaking news. National Grid has decided not to introduce its scheme tomorrow, the scheme which would pay households for cutting their power usage. The move would have been the first ever live run of the operator's demand flexibility service, as I said, designed to ease pressure on the country's energy grid and avoid blackouts. The scheme has been tested twice. It follows warnings from French power plants that supplies might drop. More than half of the nuclear reactors run by EDF have closed as a result of maintenance and technical problems. We'll bring you developments when we get them. The government's considering asking the armed forces to stand in for hospital staff during possible strikes this winter. Health officials are drawing up contingencies to cover frontline workers as ambulance drivers and paramedics consider joining nurses in their upcoming walkouts. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says they're concerned about the impact the action could have on patients.
Well, no formal request has been made by the Department of Health to the military, but of course we will look as part of our normal contingency plans at a range of options. The priority for me is to continue the dialogue with the trade unions, with the RCN. I've been extremely clear that my door is open. They have raised a range of issues, not just pay, but also about working conditions, patient safety, and so I'm very happy to continue that dialogue.
The Foreign Secretary is urging the Chinese government to listen to its people after a weekend of protests against strict COVID restrictions. 10 people were killed in a tower block fire. That sparked civil unrest across the country. Demonstrators claim that coronavirus measures in place may have hindered people's escape from the fire. The demonstrators are now calling for President Xi Jinping's resignation. The UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly is urging the Chinese government to listen to their demands.
It is rare that the Chinese people protest publicly like this. They know the risks. In fact, some of the protesters are saying they know the risks, but it's something they feel incredibly strongly about. And as I say, because they are a rarity, I think that both the international community should take notice, but more importantly, the Chinese government itself should listen to what the Chinese people are saying to them.
You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Mark.
Yes, it's very much Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, within the last few minutes, big breaking news. This has been confirmed that almost 450 people have crossed the channel today alone. That's in at least 9 small boats after almost a fortnight without crossings due to bad weather. The news is breaking right here on GB News, of course. Back in Westminster, there's growing Tory anger about Britain being taken for a ride when it comes to the asylum system. 50 MPs have written to Rishi Sunak to get channel migrants sent back home more quickly. The backbenchers demand that economic migrants coming from safe countries like Albania, which, by the way, now both major parties admit is a safe country, can be deported straight away. A Downing Street spokesperson has responded to calls saying that the illegal crossings and manipulation of the system detract from our ability to provide refuge to those in genuine need. And, of course, this comes amid something that we're going to be talking about later on in the show, about growing concern among people when it comes to issues for public health. Are some migrants with diseases picked up abroad being dispersed now across the UK? Difficult subject to talk about that because you don't want to stigmatise people, but we can't just bury our heads in the sand and ignore it, can we now? Right, OK, so let's start with that big breaking news happening right here on GB News. The first full breaking news. Almost 450 people have crossed the English Channel in 9 small boats so far today. Joining me in the studio to give us the latest is our very own Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, what is the latest?
Well, of course, it was the 13th of November, the last time we had a good weather day that allowed hundreds of people to come across in small boats. In the more than 2 weeks since, nothing has come across the channel. Now, today, a break in the weather, flat calm out there in the channel, and that's seen these boats push off from the coasts of northwest France. 9 boats so far, almost 450 people, our sources have told us. That's it for the moment. They've been intercepting these boats throughout the morning. There are no sightings at the moment, but you will often get later in the day another surge of boats coming. So let's just watch this space. Also, tomorrow and some other days this week, we're expecting good weather conditions. So the prospect is that we could see hundreds, even thousands of people crossing the channel throughout today.
So you're expecting to see an increase in channel crossings, despite the fact that just because it's winter, it doesn't necessarily mean that the conditions are too bad. And clearly, these people coming across now have not been deterred by reports of mass crowding at detention centres or the threat of deportation or anything like this. They're just going to keep coming.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last year, actually, November was the busiest month of that year. And the reason is that a lot of these people on the other side of the channel have been involved in the farming sector over in France, picking vegetables and the like. That season has ended, so many of them then head to try to get over the channel to the UK. This year it's been different because it's been very bad weather in November, so that's not happened. But a lot of pressure now, Patrick, on the government to do something about this, not just the numbers coming across, but the issues of Albanians who many feel have no right to claim asylum coming from a peaceful country, and also the health concerns about those coming across with diseases like diphtheria. I've been taking a look at the pressures facing the Home Secretary and the government. Just after first light, the Border Force vessel Typhoon could be seen approaching Dover Harbour, with the first of hundreds of migrants picked up in the Channel this morning. Around 50 people were taken on board Typhoon for the journey to the Dover Processing Centre. For more than a fortnight, bad weather has largely scuppered attempts by the criminal gangs to push boats off the beaches of northwestern France. In fact, since the 13th of November, just one small boat with 36 people on board has made it across the English Channel. But conditions are now flat calm, meaning some of the thousands who've been waiting in various makeshift camps around Dunkirk and Calais are being funneled down to the beaches and onto the boats. Increasingly frustrated at the government's seeming inability to get a grip on the crisis, around 50 Conservative MPs have written to the Prime Minister, demanding he introduce emergency legislation to deal in particular with the number of Albanians arriving in small boats. They want all Albanians rapidly removed back to their own country, and any who claim to have been trafficked also returned home.
One of the problems is the longer you take, the more appeals you get. There's a harsh truth that if they're here for a couple of weeks, they'll find a British lawyer and away they go. If they're here for a couple of years, they'll meet somebody, get married, have children, and then the story's over. They can stay because they have family rights. So the quicker you do it, the better.
Are you concerned about the spread of other diseases, Home Secretary?
It is yet more pressure on the Home Secretary, already dealing with the consequences of dozens of migrants who were infected with diphtheria being farmed out to various hotels around the UK, even though they were highly infectious.
Well, the risk is very low, partly because there's very high uptake of vaccination within the British public in the first place, but also we had a targeted action of vaccinations at Manston, and so 500 people were vaccinated before they actually left Manston, and it's something that UK HSA are monitoring extremely closely, and that's why they took the targeted action that they did.
It is a growing health crisis within a migrant crisis that shows no sign of slowing. With good weather conditions throughout most of this week, authorities are braced for the possibility that thousands more could cross the Channel in the days ahead. Mark White, GB News.
Yes, exactly. Well, that breaking news is that now 9 boats have been recovered today from the Channel, almost 450 people today alone after a bit of a lull for bad weather. But lots to go at here, ladies and gentlemen, because 50 Conservative MPs have now written, too little too late, some people are saying. It's about time, others are saying, to the Prime Minister to say we need an urgent change in our law. Albania now recognised as a safe country, not just by, frankly, loads of other nations, but now by the two major political parties right here in Britain, both Labour and the Conservatives, and I think finally a recognition that our legal system needs to change. Someone can be rejected for asylum, i.e. we don't think you're fleeing anything, but they can claim that modern slavery, human trafficking angle, which makes it very difficult to deport them. That, according to many MPs and vast swathes of the British public, frankly, needs to be changed. The other massive topic is this spread of diseases, the potential spread of diseases. We don't want to stigmatise anyone. It's a difficult topic to talk about, which is why I suspect many other news outlets are not doing it. But uncomfortable as it may be, if it's true, then it's a problem for people. Have people with various diseases been dispersed now across the United Kingdom? Public health concerns, and rightly so. But back to that letter of 50 Conservative MPs to the Prime Minister, urging him to get a grip on this migrant crisis. GB News' political reporter is live in Westminster for us now, the epicentre of this letter. Olivia, it seems to centre around a change in the law. Will Rishi Sunak listen to it? Some people saying it's too little too late.
Well, it comes from a number of very senior Conservative MPs. You've got Liam Fox there, former Cabinet Secretary, Graham Brady, chairman of the 1922 committee, who, it should be noted, doesn't often speak out that loudly about very controversial political matters. Then, of course, you've got GB's own Esther McVeigh, big, important voice in the Conservative Party. So it's big beasts that are speaking to Rishi Sunak about this issue. And the amendment which they're proposing to the modern slavery legislation does sound quite logical. David Davis has been doing the media rounds today, has spoken to GB News, and essentially what he's saying is that if people are being trafficked over to Britain, if they come to Britain and say that they've been trafficked here against their will, then we should be able to return them to their native Albania without any questions asked, because essentially if they're here against their will, then the kindest and most humane thing to do would be to send them back. That's the logic behind this amendment. The MPs who've written this letter think that it would actually be very simple to get this change to the legislation through. But it's not at all clear that that is the case. The modern slavery law, which has been shown to be a sort of loophole in our immigration system, was written up by Theresa May and was, as far as she was concerned, the sort of crowning jewel in her time as Prime Minister. So she's written it quite tightly, and trying to change it now might be rather difficult. This is, of course, against the backdrop of Rishi Sunak having quite a lot of other problems to contend with. There's the growing rebellion on wind farms, and of course the strikes which threaten to cripple the country in the period leading up to Christmas.
Yes, indeed. Olivia, thank you very much. Expertly summarised as ever. Olivia Utley there, our political correspondent, live from Westminster. If you're just joining us, the big breaking news is that almost 450 migrants have crossed the Channel so far today in 9 boats. That number expected to rise after a lull in the weather. Also on top of that, yes, 50 MPs. Now, they're writing to Rishi Sunak to get a change in the law. Really interesting point, this. And I think it's one of those things that's so obvious, actually, that I can't believe that a lot of us didn't come up with it earlier on, which is that if people are getting rejected for asylum claims, which, frankly, loads of them are when they get processed, that means that what we're saying is we think where you've come from is safe. Now, both major political parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, now hold their hands up and admit freely that Albania is indeed a safe country. So what these people do when they're rejected is claim that they were trafficked here under modern slavery. Well, it makes complete sense then, doesn't it? You don't want to be here, surely. You're here against your will. Your own country is safe. Well, why can't we send you back there more quickly? And that, to me, anyway, would make perfect sense. Your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And the views are flying in. Malcolm already saying, I think it's obvious to everyone except the government that as long as the Border Force and the RNLI keep picking them up, the migrants will keep coming. I would suggest, Malcolm, that, yes, people will agree with you on that, keep these emails coming in, but if there is that deterrent, which is basically your excuse of modern slavery, whilst we're sympathetic towards it, will still mean a return ticket back home, that could be the deterrent, and dare I say it, a lot easier than getting bums on seats to a plane to Rwanda. But we have covered this a lot on the show. But as long as the cost of living crisis continues, public services become increasingly stretched, tensions are rising in communities where migrants are being housed in hotels. Now, concerns were raised about the conditions in some of these processing centres. There's been reports, of course, about overcrowding, massive overcrowding. I'm sure that's true because these detention centres were not built to house the sheer volume of people coming across the Channel. But there's also massive concerns, not just about public safety when it comes to who some of these people are, why are they in hotels right around the UK, but also how healthy some of these immigrants are, because there have been massive reports of diphtheria and other illnesses, and people concerned, frankly, that's going to be spread around their area. And they're right to be concerned about it. The residents of Skegness, which is a busy tourist hub on the Lincolnshire coastline, have demanded answers from their local MP. Our reporter, Will Hollis, sent us this, and just before we play it, listen very carefully to what the local MP says here, because I've got a comment to make on the back of this. Let's play it.
Why wasn't the answer?
A community at boiling point. The local MP trying to cool tensions.
They are from some of the most war-torn and troubled.
Despite sitting on Britain's edge, Skegness is at the centre of the migrant row.
I'm passionate about, the residents that live here, and a lot of us aren't feeling very safe.
We don't know the backgrounds of these people, where they're from, what have they done, what are they actually running away from.
They're getting free medical treatment. We can't get a doctor in Skegness.
Not everyone is worried. One Ukrainian woman questioned why she was welcomed so warmly, while these men are met with hostility. 5 hotels are being used by more than 200 asylum seekers, while the Home Office struggles with processing delays and a lack of accommodation. Skegness MP Matt Warman says the future is uncertain, but he understands people's concern.
When they say, for instance, we want to know when a hotel might stop being used, I think it's right that, as I say, I'm honest and say, look, I can't give you a date right now. What I can do is apply the maximum pressure to the Home Secretary, to the government. This is a situation that those people themselves say is not acceptable. We've got to move on from it as quickly as possible.
More than 2 million visitors descend on Skegness each year, but out of season, it's quiet and hotels are largely empty.
The Home Office says that accommodation is needed for 37,000 asylum seekers here in the UK.
Some locals say trade is already turning away from the town. Danny and Adrian are on the town council.
Without tourism, it's the major industry that we have on the coast, tourists. And if we lose the tourists, then Skegness will be in trouble.
These people that are here, unfortunately, have just come through, perilous waters to get to our shores with no money. So they can't support an economy that struggles for over half the year.
The local district council, East Lindsey, declined to comment, saying it's a Home Office issue. But in cases where asylum is granted, the council could face additional pressures, according to the leader, Craig Leyland, speaking of his own accord.
We would say there's a balance between what we can do locally in terms of the numbers that we can support and how that goes forward. That's our concern, is that balance. We don't want that to tip over into community cohesion problems when that balance tips the wrong way.
In a statement, the Home Office said that the use of hotels to house asylum seekers is unacceptable and that it's a temporary solution. The UK hit its highest levels of net migration this week, despite Brexit and border promises. In Skegness, a town with the highest leave vote in the country, referendum wishes and reality are very different things. Will Hollis for GB News in Skegness.
Yes, OK, all right. Really important package. I just want to pick up very quickly on what Matt Warman there, the Conservative MP for that area there in Skegness, said. And he was trying to appease some of the locals. Massive disquiet there, massive discontent from local residents, as indeed is their right. And one would imagine it's being mirrored up and down the country, saying they are, speaking of asylum seekers, they are from some of the most war-torn countries. How does he know? Because when I speak to local council leaders right across the country and local councillors right across the country and local MPs right across the country, they tell me that the Home Office will not tell them where these people are from a lot of the time, exactly who they are, and they don't even get a heads up, frankly, about where these hotels are going to be popping up. So they wake up one morning and there's a migrant hotel there. So I question whether or not that MP knows whether or not these people are indeed from some of the most war-torn countries in the world, and how he would know that. He must have a direct feed there that other MPs and other councillors don't have. Keep these emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. A couple of good ones, very quickly. We're talking about the same thing for months. This is from Christopher, and nothing's being done about it yet. I know, tell me about it. And this is a good one, a powerful one from Alistair, which says that these people are entitled to dental and healthcare as it's their human rights. What about my human rights? I'm paying taxes and I can't get an NHS dentist or doctor. That is from Alistair. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Coming up is Rishi Sunak facing another Tory rebellion, this time over onshore wind, after former Cabinet Minister Alok Sharma joined Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, gosh, that's a rogues gallery, isn't it, in opposing the ban. Also this hour, yes, talking of healthcare, Alistair, from wherever you're from, we've got more on it because nurses prepared to strike in their demand for an increased pay. But I'm asking whether or not these demands are reasonable or unreasonable. Are they putting their purses before patients? I really want to drill down in that. We as patients have a right to know whether or not their demands are reasonable. I'll be back in a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
A very good afternoon to you. Before we head back to Patrick at 3:30, I'm Rosie Wright giving you a news update. More than 50 Conservative MPs have signed a letter urging the Prime Minister to introduce emergency legislation to ease the migrant crisis. The group says, firstly, people should be more rapidly returned to safe countries that they come from. And secondly, when claims are made that people have been unwillingly trafficked to the UK, they should be sent back without objection. GB News sources say that more than 450 people have been intercepted on 9 small boats today. National Grid has decided not to introduce its energy saving scheme tomorrow. That would be paying households if they cut their power usage. The move would have been the first ever live run of the operator's demand flexibility service, designed to ease pressure on the country's energy grid and avoid blackouts. The government's launching a £1 billion scheme to make middle-income homes more energy efficient. The 3-year scheme will see hundreds of thousands of homes receive loft and cavity wall insulation from the spring. Households that don't currently get support to upgrade their homes will be prioritised, whilst a fifth of the funding will be set aside for the most vulnerable. The government's considering asking the armed forces to stand in for hospital staff during possible strikes this winter. Health officials are drawing up contingencies to cover frontline workers as ambulance drivers and paramedics consider joining nurses in their upcoming walkouts. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says they're concerned about the impact the action could have on patients. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News.
Thank you, Rosie. Here's Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, loads for us to get stuck into today. Rishi Sunak is facing a growing rebellion over onshore wind, believe it or not, after former Cabinet Minister Alok Sharma joined, get this, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss in opposing the ban. This is more exciting than it seems. Don't worry, we'll liven it up. The president of the COP26 Climate Summit said he supports letting local communities decide, backing residents being given reduced energy bills in exchange for their support of new developments. Now, joining me is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, There he is. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Now, Tom, as far as I can see, yes, all right, local residents may well be, quotes-unquote, bribed in order to have these things if they decide that they want them on the landscape. Similar to what a lot of fracking companies were going to do, although I suspect they'd get richer if they did the fracking side of things. Does this really centre as to whether or not these giant wind farms are a massive blight on the landscape?
Well, do you know what? It's interesting, Patrick. I've been speaking to some of the rebels involved in this amendment today who make the case that this is actually something that was legalised briefly under Liz Truss. Her mini-budget announced its intention to not only deliver shale gas extraction in the United Kingdom with community consent, that, of course, fracking vote got all of the big media attention, but in parallel, Liz Truss also announced that she wanted onshore winds to have the same sort of approval process in the United Kingdom. It was effectively banned in 2015 under David Cameron through a mechanism whereby even one objection to an onshore wind farm could prevent the entire farm from going ahead. Now, that's out of kilter with the rest of the planning system. We don't do any other infrastructure projects like that. We don't do any other energy infrastructure like that, whether it's nuclear power stations or hydroelectric dams or anything else. Clearly, that was out of kilter. Well, Liz Truss, while she signalled her intention to legalise onshore wind, when Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, one of his first acts was to chuck just about everything that Liz Truss did, abolishing most of the supply-side reform measures that her government wanted to do. That didn't only include many of the things that we saw in the mini-budget that got a lot of the attention. It also, of course, included this liberalisation of onshore wind. So it's interesting to see that Liz Truss and indeed Boris Johnson and a few people that were in Liz Truss's cabinet as well, notably Simon Clarke, who was the former Levelling Up Secretary. His name is on the amendment. He originated this rebellion, if we want to call it that. They are all saying, well, this is a pro-growth reform that Rishi Sunak rode back on.
Yes, it is, but interesting to compare that with the anti-fracking stuff, because one would imagine that might have brought, I know there are two sides to this, a lot more revenue for those particular areas. Clearly, this is deemed to be greener. Question marks, Tom, over how effective this is. And some people might be saying, well, I don't want to open my curtains or go on a holiday to the Lake District and see these giant, guillotines for birds around the countryside. Why can't we shove them all offshore? And if we are going to start building things, maybe it should be houses.
Well, some people might say that birds also fly over the ocean, and maybe those birds had it coming. But ultimately, if we want to get serious about this issue, there is indeed a lot of opinion polling about this. And the remarkable thing is that the opinion of the British public has shifted quite remarkably in the last few years. It's around 70% of even Conservative voters who are in favour of onshore wind farms as things stand. And perhaps that's because of the context of the energy crisis in which we find ourselves. It's pretty surprising to many people that any form of energy might be slapped with a ban, whether that's shale gas or onshore wind. A number of those people behind this amendment in favour of onshore wind were also the people behind being in favour of fracking as well. So perhaps those two things go hand in hand more so than a lot of the media might suggest. But yes, you do make a fair point in that there will be some people who are more opposed to them, and that's why this amendment and the people behind it want to generate a form of community consent for it, so that it would still need, of course, that planning permission, that significant local opposition could stop it, but it would move away from the system which we currently find ourselves in, which is just one individual complaint could stop an entire wind farm. To those rebels, that seems disproportionate.
Tom Harwood, thank you very much. Tom Harwood, our political correspondent there outside Westminster. Westminster is stacked full of GB News political correspondents today. I want to hear from you on this one, though. GBViews at gbnews.uk. About the wind farms, where are you on it? Look, I'm pretty pro-fracking. I'm also not anti-wind farm. Those two things can go hand in hand. I don't like the way they might blight the landscape. I probably would rather have a load of them offshore. But I don't know, do you live in an area where you could either frack or have a wind farm? How do you feel about it? I want to hear from you. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Although the way my energy bills are going, I'm thinking of strapping a solar panel to my back and just be done with it. Anyway, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on what was our top story, and that news breaking just as I came on air, and will continue to break throughout the call of this show, which is about the numbers of people coming across the channel. 450 today, almost, in 9 boats. It comes as 50 Tory MPs have written a strongly worded letter, very British, to our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, urging him to reform the law to, frankly, stop us being taken for a ride by people who claim to have been victims of modern slavery, when, let's be honest with you, it's not. Gary says, there is an easy solution to this, but the government do not want to make the decision. It's quite simple. As soon as they land in this country, they are shipped straight to an airport and sent to Rwanda. Not in days, not in weeks, but within hours. They are processed there. I wonder if the Rwanda plan would be more palatable if it had a caveat in it, that if you were given asylum, granted asylum, then you could come back and live in the UK, as opposed to being deported from there. I'm not sure that would be massively popular with Gary, though, to be fair. Sylvia says, I've great sympathy for the sad trafficked young people especially. They must be anxious to get back to complete their education. Their parents must be so worried. And this is a cracking point, Sylvia. And earlier on, I made this point, which is I can't believe that people like myself weren't saying this more. If you claim to be the victim of human trafficking, of modern slavery, you, by definition, presumably, were brought here against your will. Well, a couple of points on that. If you have tried and failed to go down the asylum route before, so we don't think you're fleeing from anything, it does beg the question why you didn't just go in hard with the modern slavery stuff. It also begs the question, why don't you want to be sent back? You must be gutted to be in Britain. You must be absolutely gutted. You were dragged here, kicking and screaming against your will. Your bank account emptied itself, and the money, the human trafficker came to collect that money themselves from you at gunpoint, and now you've found yourself in this horrible little country, and you are desperate to go back to Albania and carry on with the life you had before. Well, what's your problem with being sent back there, then? If you are the victim of modern slavery, I feel incredibly sorry for you. Presumably, we can get you sent back to where you want to be very, very quickly. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're moving on from that now to another massive story for you all. Why is it a story for you all? Well, because at some point we will all need the NHS, won't we? We will all need healthcare. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, has insisted that his door is open to resume talks with health unions to put a stop to unprecedented strike action in the NHS. As he warned, there will be impacts on patients if the strikes go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. There's reports today that the Army could step in to help the NHS as the government looks at contingency plans. I'm about to get a raft of emails now going, it's not just the Army, it's the military as a whole. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully it never happens. But the Royal College of Nursing General Secretary Pat Cullen wrote to the Health Secretary telling him that it is negotiations or nothing. Oh, there we go. Well, in a few moments, I will speak to the health editor at The Express, Lucy Johnson. And a little bit later on in the show, right, big one this, I'm going to speak to a member of the Health Select Committee. Remember, we couldn't get to the bottom of what the RMT wanted on the railways because they wouldn't tell us. So what did we do? We got someone on for the Transport Select Committee, and he revealed right here on GB News, right here on my show, that actually the demands from Mick Lynch were way above inflation. Well, we kind of know what they want in the health sector, don't we? We kind of know what nurses want. It's roughly between 17 and 19%. What I want to know is what the government's offering them. Here are some graphics. We can get stuck into those right now. The Royal College of Nursing is demanding workers receive a pay rise of 5% above inflation, which is currently at around 11.1%. That takes an average nurse's salary from £34,000 a year to £39,780. That's an average, remember. Members of the Royal College of Nursing will walk out in England, Wales and Northern Ireland on these two dates, the 15th and the 20th of December. On Friday, we found out that any walkout in Scotland has been postponed after the government there reopened NHS pay negotiations. The government say that the demands from the Royal College of Nursing are closer to a 19.2% pay rise, and it would cost us, you, me, anyone who dares to pay tax, £10 billion a year if they met those demands, which is a whopping lot of money, isn't it? Finally, let's have a look at what's on the table, and this is really important. As I mentioned, strike action in Scotland is on hold after the Scottish Government's final pay offer, averaging a 7.5% increase. So the Scottish nurses essentially settled at around 7.5%. In England and Wales, NHS staff were awarded a pay rise of 4% earlier this year. They're awarded one of 3 and a little bit percent the year before that. So that 4% was on top of the 3% they got earlier. So Now I've given you some context, and bear in mind we are going to be speaking a bit later on to a member of the Health Select Committee, which is going to be fascinating to find out how those negotiations are going. I want you to tell me at home, in your car, whatever you're doing, gbviews@gbnews.uk, do you think those demands are reasonable? Do you think that putting public health in jeopardy is worth it for the amount of money they're asking for? To shed some more light on this, I am joined by Health and Social Affairs Editor at the Sunday Express, Lucy Johnson. Lucy, great stuff. Right, so they want about a 19.2% pay rise, the Royal College of Nursing. They're threatening 2 walkouts, the 15th and the 20th of December. Supposedly, the government has said, well, you can have around 4%. Do you think that's reasonable? No. Oh, no, we've not got Lucy, unfortunately. Well, it's all right, because I want to have a direct conversation with you, the viewer and the listener, anyway. In fact, let's just bring up a couple more of those stats, actually, because I want to drill down in these. If we can go back to some of those graphics for me, that would be absolutely lovely. So let's just bring them up again, because I think it's really important that we talk about the demand. So the Royal College of Nursing is demanding 5% above inflation. And this would raise the average nurse's salary by $5,780. And when you put into context that about 4% was the pay rise they got last year, 3% the year before, if you add, well, all of that together, it's, you know, an 11 or 12% pay rise, isn't it, over the course of about 18 months, which is a lot. As well, in line with inflation, you add that to this 19.2% plus that, so it's a heck of a lot of money. That average salary would now be $39,780. Now, the Royal College of Nursing will walk out on these 2 dates. It's the 15th and the 20th of December. But interestingly enough, the walkout in Scotland was postponed, wasn't it? And the government says that the demands from the Royal College of Nursing are closer to 19.2%. As I've just said, £10 billion to the taxpayer. And if we have a look at what's being offered, it's an additional pay rise, potentially of around 4%. Right, there we go. Right, well, I want to know what you think about this, ladies and gentlemen. We've gone through those figures to death, for want of a better phrase, given what we're talking about when it comes to the NHS. There is rather a lot at play here, isn't there? And I know that everyone says, well, the nurses don't take a strike action lightly and all of this stuff. But actually, when it comes to putting their purse before patient care, I want to know how you feel. What would you be willing to compromise? We are going to speak later on to a member of the Health Select Committee, because it's all very well and good throwing your hands in the air, as, by the way, the Labour Party and the Tory Party are both singing from the same hymn sheet now, not for the first time, the way that politics in this country has gone, saying that the pay demands from the nurses are unreasonable. They're unaffordable is the word. They're unaffordable. 19.2%, unaffordable. And I think most people would agree to that. But what should the compromise be? Because clearly there is going to have to be some form of compromise, isn't there? We are going to have to suck it and see when it comes to the taxpayer a little bit on nursing. Let me find out your views on this. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But we're moving on now. Something a little bit, well, it's a little bit lighter, but not lighter. Matt Hancock, he finished third on I'm a Celebrity last night. If you've not watched I'm a Celebrity, spoiler alert, Matt Hancock came third, Jill Scott won. Have that. Anyway, the former Health Secretary was beaten by Lioness footballer Jill Scott and Hollyoaks star Owen Warner. But has the MP's participation in the show been controversial? Have people's perceptions been changed? I wanted a debate on this. I'm very, very, very conflicted about this. I think everyone deserves a second chance. However, when it comes to some of the things that Matt Hancock was responsible for during the coronavirus crisis, lockdowns, massive waste of money when it came to PPE, but crucially for me, the deaths of care home residents. I'm not saying he killed them himself, of course I'm not, but I am saying that decisions made contributed to the deaths of care home residents. Jabs, I know there's mixed views on the coronavirus vaccine. Matt Hancock front and centre, but simultaneously crying, laughing and looking like he'd made a mess in his trousers when he came on to another rival TV show to say that the vaccine, we've got the jab. Well, actually, should he have had the chance to rehabilitate his public image? Or is it in really poor taste when you look at all the people who died or lost their jobs, etc.? I am joined now by former I'm a Celebrity contestants and former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and the political commentator Emma Webb. Oh, good grief, Lembit, you've gone all out with the backdrop there. Is that an I'm a Celebrity background? It is, of course it is.
I don't know. In Australia, and the mountains right behind me. That's my story. I'm sticking to it, my friend.
Going for a trip with Matt Hancock by the sounds of things. Right. Lembit, I will ask you this. For somebody who lost a relative in a care home where someone who wasn't even in that care home was sent into it with coronavirus, watching Matt Hancock rehabilitate his public image is a bitter pill to swallow, Lembit, is it not?
Fair enough, and I'm not telling them to do that. I lost my mother and she was in a care home. I didn't see her for most of the last 18 months of her life. My agent died of COVID, and that was a big deal for me as well. But I don't hold Matt Hancock guilty of that. He's responsible for the decisions that you've described, and also he's responsible, let's put it on the table, for breaking his own rules.
Yeah.
He resigned for that. How many times do you have to punish a person for getting something wrong? I don't think there's anything wrong in our society with the concept of forgiveness. Actually, I think that's what the New Testament says, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, Lambert, there are elements of me, and this is why I'm so conflicted on it, there are elements of me that massively agree with you. I mean, you know, there are times in my life I've had to beg for forgiveness for things that I've done, and I'm glad that people have given it to me, and I want to live in a society where we can be forgiven. But Emma Webb, I'll throw it over to you, political commentator. With something like his handling of the coronavirus crisis, should he have been given the opportunity to be popular? Because he has millions of people voted for him to win.
I do believe in forgiveness, and I agree, you know, Lembert's right. The New Testament does urge us to be forgiving. But I think actually there'll be a lot of people around the country who think that he should be seeking forgiveness for even going on this show in the first place and abandoning his constituents in the way that he did. I don't think that through this show he's redeemed himself in the way that he thinks that he has, or maybe in the way that he intended to. And I think that there is something cheapening about his decision to go into the jungle in this way. And, you know, as you said, and as Lembit pointed out there as well, you know, my grandmother was in a care home for the last years of her life, unable to hug her grandchildren and her children, locked up all by herself, really, without anybody around her, not fully understanding why that was the case. And Matt Hancock is seen by so many people around the country as a hypocrite for not keeping his own rules. And that wasn't because, you know, just simply because of the hypocrisy, because it's suggested that actually those people who were making the rules didn't think that they were really that necessary, because as he said, he apologizes for it, but he says that he did it because he was in love with somebody. So I don't think that he's fully redeemed himself. I don't think that people broadly are going to have a lot of sympathy with him, and I actually think that he's cheapened the whole thing by thinking that he can go into a reality TV show and redeem himself by becoming a celebrity and becoming popular.
OK. Lembit, there's a slightly bigger picture here, for example. Now, I appreciate the consequences of the mistakes that you make vary depending on what your job is. And if you're a health secretary in the middle of a unprecedented global pandemic, then if you make mistakes, then they tend to be absolute whoppers. However, he did make mistakes, the care home crisis, and then also potentially lying about it, saying we've thrown a protective ring around care homes. I mean, he hadn't, had he? That's just not true. Also, things like PPE expenditure, clearly as well, that absolutely horrendous footage of him snogging the face off his top aide. I mean, that's a grief. That was burnt into my retina, which he nearly replicated, actually, when he came off. His hand slipped down. Anyway, we digress. Where does this end when it comes to public rehabilitation with people? You know, do we see Shamima Begum on the next episode of I'm a Celebrity? I mean, where does this end?
Well, first of all, I think you need to live your life rather than his. That's just my opinion. I just want to base your life on Matt's. Then fill your boots, mate. Go on the jungle. Serious answer to your serious question is this. He did make mistakes, and I think those of us who actually watched the programme closely heard him say that that was not a justification for what he did wrong. One thing I was impressed with was he took the hit. And he was humble about it, and he listened to the others. They weren't bullying him, really. People use that phrase ill-advisedly, but they had a go at him, and he sucked it up. And he's admitted, even in his debrief with Art and Deck, that he'd done lots of things wrong. What did he want? He wanted a little bit of forgiveness. I still think that he's probably talking primarily to his kids when he says that, but whoever he was talking to, surely this is allowed in this country. He didn't deliberately kill everybody. He didn't deliberately get the thing wrong, and I don't think that he's a crook. I think what you saw was the honest guy, and I don't think that honest guy's so bad. And at least 2.5 million people, I think, voted for him in the final.
Well, this is it. And this is it. And there is such a thing as, you know, the British underdog spirit. And it is remarkable how many people have been screaming at Matt Hancock during the pandemic, thinking he's a you-know-what, and then will have gone on and voted for him and changed public opinion. But, Emma, just on this, I mean, it really is quite a fascinating thing to think about the psyche of the British public when it comes to this stuff. And clearly a lot of people now have decided that they do really like Matt Hancock. But my concern with this is, what was he famous for? What was he well known for? He was famous for, some would argue, ballsing up being health secretary in the middle of a pandemic, and can now go and make an absolute wheelbarrow load of cash on the celebrity circuit. He has profited, potentially, out of people's misery, has he not?
I agree, Patrick. And but I think that what this does is this actually suggests something about our culture more broadly, but particularly about our political culture, because I think his decision to go on this show was selfish. He wanted to redeem himself. He clearly wants celebrity. He wants fame out of this. And I think that this is actually part of the problem, the egoism in our politics, the idea of it being about the self rather than, and about your image rather than about the people that you're supposed to be serving. He should be at home serving his constituents. He shouldn't be on a reality TV show trying to launder his reputation in this way. The best thing for him to have done would have been to redeem himself by doing his job well.
OK, look, both of you, thank you very much. We could talk all day about this, but we're going to have to move on. But a really fascinating discussion, and one, genuinely, that I can really see both sides of. That is former I'm a Celebrity contestant and former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and the political commentator Emma Webb. Big question for me on that is, why did Matt Hancock have to go into the jungle for us to find out who he was? Surely he could attend some of his local MP surgeries and people would find out there. But anyway, there we go. Don't go anywhere, because after 4 o'clock, I will be speaking to a Conservative MP and, crucially, a member of the Health Select Committee. I am desperate to get answers for you. If nurses are going on strike, NHS staff are going on strike, we need to know exactly what their demands are and exactly what the negotiation is. We have a right to know. The NHS is not free. We all pay for it. There's reports the government are considering bringing in the military to solve these strikes. I will hopefully speak to health editor at The Express, Lucy Johnson. I'll be back in a tick. Loads to talk about, people, loads.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Yes, OK, back now to reports that the army could be brought in to cover for nurses when they walk out later this month. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, has insisted that his door's open to resume those talks with health unions, but the Royal College of Nursing General Secretary Pat Cullen wrote to the Health Secretary telling him it is negotiations or nothing. Well, we can now speak, fingers crossed, to Health and Social Affairs Editor at the Sunday Express, Lucy Johnson. Lucy, yes, you are here now, I believe. Fantastic. OK, right. First and foremost, are we going to bring the army in? Is this a thing, or is it just the thing that people say when they're in crisis? Oh, can't get bread at Tesco's, bring the army in.
Well, I think there are contingency plans. It's not formalised yet, but we have done that before. During COVID, we brought the army in to deliver PPE and also to do testing at mobile COVID testing units. So it has happened before. The army obviously is trained in certain emergencies, but they're not going to have the range of skills, the diagnostic skills to understand sort of every patient's needs. So it is really quite a serious, there must be...
right.
If these talks are happening, this is very, very serious.
Well, indeed. I mean, supposedly the demands that are being made by the Royal College of Nursing are around the 19.2% pay rise mark. The government, as far as we understand it, have said, well, if we were to give in for what you want, then it would cost us around 10 billion quid a year, and we haven't got that kind of cash at the moment. But can I live through the medium of you, please, Lucy? Because later on, I've got a member of the Health Select Committee coming on. And if you were trapped in a room with them, what kind of stuff would you be asking them? Because I'm keen to know, is the government really negotiating at all? There has to be a bit of give and take. And is it all the fact that nurses are being really unreasonable?
Well, you can look at it in two ways. It is an unfortunate time to be striking. We're going into winter. We have crippling waiting lists. We have an increase in respiratory viruses. We have patients, 25,000 of them, waiting on trolleys. And we have an emergency health service which is broken, effectively, and ambulances can't do their handovers. There's never a good time to go on strike, but this really has to be a very, very, we're going into winter. 19% is very high. And I think that the problems really in the health service, no one's really looking at wider issues. We've had 5 health secretaries over just 2 years, and no one's really grabbing hold of the serious underlying problems. The NHS does need to be looked at, needs to be reformed, and it's not going to function unless we can do some reforms.
Lucy, thank you very much. That was short and sweet, but that's the way it is sometimes. Lucy Johnson there, who is Health and Social Affairs Editor at the Sunday Express. Controversial view, this, people. The Tory government often gets told that maybe they're running the NHS into the ground deliberately in order to privatise their thing. Could one possibly suggest that it's being run into the ground deliberately to exacerbate a situation that means that when people want a pay rise, they've got the government over a barrel? Who said that? GBViews at gbnews.uk. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here. Lots to come, including I will speak to a member of that Health Select Committee to ask her if nurses' pay demands are reasonable. You and I, as patients, have a right to know. Who do we blame for all of this chaos? Also, more on that big breaking story this afternoon. It has now been confirmed that almost 450 people crossed the Channel today alone in 9 small boats. There are health concerns for the wider public about some of these people being dispersed with diseases. There are issues, growing public anger, growing backbench Tory anger as well. Letters going in to Rishi Sunak telling him to fix our broken asylum system. I'll be back in a tick.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just gone 4 o'clock. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. The big ones for us today, people. Almost 450 people have crossed the channel today in 9 small boats, marking the first crossings in almost a fortnight. That's the big breaking news. We're getting stuck into that as it comes after more than 50 Tory MPs have written to the Prime Minister calling for action and growing concerns about a potential public health crisis if some of those people who happen to be carrying diseases are dispersed throughout the community. In other news, nurses could be replaced by the army if they walk out next month in a dispute over pay. And as well, Matt Hancock got himself a 3rd place finish in I'm a Celebrity. A massively mixed bag. Aside from the asylum system, Matt Hancock has got more emails in my inbox than anything else. You obviously do care about it, even if you pretend not to, ladies and gentlemen. Do you think that Matt Hancock has been forgiven? GBviews at gbnews.uk. All of that coming your way very shortly after the headlines.
Good afternoon, 2 minutes past 4. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. More than 50 Conservative MPs have signed a letter urging the Prime Minister to introduce emergency legislation to ease the migrant crisis. They want modern slavery laws changed so that people are returned to safe countries faster. They also say those who claim they've been trafficked should be sent back without objection. Signatories, including Sir Graham Brady and Esther McVeigh, believe it would deter people from crossing the Channel. GB News now understands almost 450 people have been intercepted on 9 small boats so far today. The letter's author, MP David Davies, said the change would mean migrants could be sent home within days of arriving.
So if we got the gumption to do it with all new arrivals from a safe country, I don't mean from Syria or Afghanistan where they may have a claim, but from a safe country, then frankly, it should knock out almost all of the 12,000 a year that we're looking at the moment.
The government's considering asking the armed forces to stand in for hospital staff during possible strikes this winter. Health officials are drawing up contingencies to cover frontline workers as ambulance drivers and paramedics consider joining nurses in their upcoming walkouts. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says they're concerned about the impact the action could have on patients.
Well, no formal request has been made by the Department of Health to the military, but of course we will look as part of our normal contingency plans at a range of options. The priority for me is to continue the dialogue with the trade unions, with the RCN. I've been extremely clear that my door is open. They have raised a range of issues, not just pay, but also about working conditions, patient safety, and so I'm very happy to continue that dialogue.
The Foreign Secretary is backing the right to peaceful protests in China over COVID restrictions. Protesters turned out again this evening, despite a strong police presence. It follows demonstrations at the weekend, which started after 10 people were killed in a fire at an apartment block. Protesters blame quarantine measures, saying they prevented the victims from escaping. James Cleverly says the Chinese government should take notice of these rare protests.
It's rare that the Chinese people protest publicly like this. They know the risks. In fact, some of the protesters are saying they know the risks, but it's something they feel incredibly strongly about. And as I say, because they are a rarity, I think that both the international community should take notice, but more importantly, the Chinese government itself should listen to what the Chinese people are saying to them.
National Grid has decided not to introduce its energy savings scheme tomorrow, paying households if they cut power usage. The move would have been the first ever live run of the operator's demand flexibility service, designed to ease pressure on the country's energy grid and avoid blackouts. The government's launching a £1 billion scheme to make middle-income homes more energy efficient. The 3-year scheme will see hundreds of thousands of homes receive loft and cavity wall insulation from the spring. Households that don't currently get support to upgrade their homes will be prioritised, whilst a fifth of the funding will be set aside for the most vulnerable. Business Secretary Grant Shapps told us the measures will help households reduce their energy consumption.
£1 billion, which is in addition to a lot more money that's been provided previously, is to allow anyone in any kind of housing, could be private rent, it could be their own home, could be social housing, to improve the property in order to make sure that it meets those higher standards. And that will save people, quite a lot of money.
Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told GB News Labour wants to insulate 19 million homes as soon as possible.
It's about 10 years too late. I mean, this should have been a quick early win for the government, reducing people's fuel bills and doing the right thing by the environment. I mean, it's a win-win. Why has it taken so long? This government have neither the ambition or the direction. Of course, I welcome when they come a little bit onto our territory, whether it's a windfall tax or greater energy efficiency ambition, but they've got nowhere near the comprehensive programme they need to get this country onto the right path.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Welcome back. Our top story today is that almost 450 people have crossed the Channel in 9 small boats, marking the first crossings in almost a fortnight following bad weather. This latest influx of Channel migrants come as Tory discontent grows. Is it the whiff of a rebellion? Too little, too late. Some people are saying 50 MPs have written now to Rishi Sunak to demand changes to modern slavery laws. This group of backbench MPs, which includes, by the way, former cabinet ministers, are calling for those migrants who say they are victims of human trafficking to be returned. And surely that's what they want if they've been brought here against their will at great expense. Well, we'll do you a favour then, and off you pop back to exactly where presumably you want to be. But a Downing Street spokesperson has said that the government is committed to tackling abuses in the asylum system. Yes, lots to talk about here, amid growing concerns as well from ordinary members of the public about public health. Reports of things like diphtheria now being prevalent amongst just some of the people coming across the Channel. Have they been dispersed into your community? Mark White brings us this report.
Just after first light, the border force vessel Typhoon could be seen approaching Dover Harbour, with the first of hundreds of migrants picked up in the Channel this morning. Around 50 people were taken on board Typhoon for the journey to the Dover Processing Centre. For more than a fortnight, bad weather has largely scuppered attempts by the criminal gangs to push boats off the beaches of northwestern France. In fact, since the 13th of November, just one small boat with 36 people on board has made it across the English Channel. But conditions are now flat calm, meaning some of the thousands who've been waiting in various makeshift camps around Dunkirk and Calais are being funnelled down to the beaches and onto the boats. Increasingly frustrated at the government's seeming inability to get a grip on the crisis, around 50 Conservative MPs have written to the Prime Minister, demanding he introduce emergency legislation to deal in particular with the number of Albanians arriving in small boats. They want all Albanians rapidly removed back to their own country, and any who claim to have been trafficked also returned home.
One of the problems is the longer you take, the more appeals you get. There's a harsh truth that if they're here for a couple of weeks, they'll find a British lawyer and away they go. If they're here for a couple of years, they'll meet somebody, get married, have children, and then the story's over. They can stay because they have family rights. So the quicker you do it, the better.
Are you concerned about the spread of other diseases, Home Secretary?
It is yet more pressure on the Home Secretary, already dealing with the consequences of dozens of migrants who were infected with diphtheria being farmed out to various hotels around the UK, even though they were highly infectious.
Well, the risk is very low, partly because there's very high uptake of vaccination within the British public in the first place, but also we had a targeted action of vaccinations at Manston, and so 500 people were vaccinated before they actually left Manston, and it's something that UK HSA are monitoring extremely closely and that's why they took the targeted action that they did.
It is a growing health crisis within a migrant crisis that shows no sign of slowing. With good weather conditions throughout most of this week, authorities are braced for the possibility that thousands more could cross the channel in the days ahead. Mark White, GB News.
Yeah, fascinating stuff from Mark White there, and that is the big breaking news today anyway, that 450 people have crossed in 9 small boats, although John has emailed in, thank you very much, John, to say, well, they're not that small, these boats, are they, if you can fit pretty much however many people to them. And that's a fair point, actually, John. They're becoming increasingly large boats, aren't they? Fantastic figures produced to us here by David Davis MP, which I'm looking at right now as I speak to you live, which is the initial asylum application acceptance rates, the amount of people we've accepted from Albania. And break this down, just break this down quickly, very quickly. France, the acceptance rate from Albania is 2.3%, Germany 0%, Greece 0.6%, I could go on here, Sweden 0%, Netherlands 0%, Britain, the UK, 55.4%. 55.4% acceptance rate. That's the initial ones. It is, as Mark White said, a migrant crisis, but it is also wrapped up in a health crisis and a legal crisis. 50 Conservative MPs, as we're about to hear, now are calling for a change in our laws that stop people being rejected from asylum claims, claiming modern slavery. They want those people to then go, well, OK, fair enough, we'll send you back then. It was a real shame. We're sorry that you were dragged here kicking and screaming at gunpoint, having emptied all your finances in order to do so. We will send you back to presumably where you want to be if you didn't want to be here. But there is also a health crisis, as there are increasing numbers of people apparently with diphtheria, etc., and real fears that they have just been dispersed scattergun around the country. We heard there from Health Secretary Steve Barclay and the Conservative MP David Davis, who has led on writing that letter signed by around 50 MPs. GB News' political reporter Olivia Rutley is in Westminster for us right now. Yes, Olivia, thank you very, very much. Growing disquiet among the Conservative Party backbenchers. I think a lot of people are saying, well, it's about time they stood up for ordinary members of the public who've been rather miffed about this for quite a while.
Yes, and I think constituents, MPs having gone back to speak to their constituents over the weekend can see that there is a growing problem with hotels in certain areas being overrun by migrants, meaning that it's very difficult for those hotels to keep running profitably. It's causing a big impact to tourism to the area, and people are worried about what it could do in the future to their schools and their NHS services, etc. So we're seeing this rebellion now from Conservative MPs. 50 Conservative MPs have written to the Prime Minister. What they want is a change to the modern slavery legislation, which it's widely agreed has become a loophole in the immigration system. You've got these Albanians, which now make up a third of Channel migrants, coming over here, and once they're here, they have to have their asylum claim at least looked at under modern slavery legislation. Then they're kept here for years often. On average, David Davis says it's 420 days, over a year. And while they're there, they're, as he puts it, paralysing the immigration system. So the people who really do need asylum in Britain are unable to get any safe or legal route into the UK. So that's where we stand. That some of the people who signed this letter are pretty big-hitting beasts in the Conservative Party. You've got David Davis himself, of course, Esther McVeigh, Liam Fox. It's not just sort of the usual suspects. So this is going to put big pressure on Rishi Sunak to do something about the immigration crisis. There is appetite in his government to address the Albanian migrant problem. Robert Jenrick has already said that he is moving to change some legislation, but it feels like his feet are right in the fire now, and he's going to have to do something quickly.
Just quickly, Olivia, my understanding is that Graham Brady, the chairman of the Backbench 1922 committee, might have put his name to this as well. Now, that is fascinating because despite being a politician, he does stay out of the front line of stuff, as is the nature of his job as the chair of the Backbench 1922 committee. If he has put his name to this, then that implies that he has serious concerns that the Conservative Party will lose the next general election if they don't get this sorted. And that should be a massive, massive worry for Rishi Sunak, surely.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Graham Brady holds huge influence in the Conservative Party. As we know, he's the maker or breaker of Prime Ministers, so he knows all the skeletons in the Conservative Party closet, and he's hugely influential in the party, a real big beast. So yes, I think the fact that he's put his name forward, and I keep hearing that too, could prove to be very, very significant. And yes, one way or another, it feels like Rishi Sunak must sort this out very quickly indeed to prevent another risk of total annihilation.
Indeed, Olivia, thank you very much. As ever, Olivia Utley there from Westminster, just reacting to this news that, yes, on top of the breaking stuff, that 450 people have crossed in 9 small boats today. There are now concerns amongst at least 50 Conservative MPs who have apparently written to Rishi Sunak to say we need a change in law so that once someone's asylum system application has been rejected, they can't claim modern slavery. If they do claim modern slavery, then we send them back straight away. Fascinating this, though, and I think more needs to be made of it, that potentially Sir Graham Brady, the chair of the backbench Conservative 1922 committee, has, as we understand it, put his name to this letter. This is the guy that makes and breaks prime ministers. This is the guy whose job, basically, it is to keep the Conservatives winning at the next general elections. That's essentially a massive, massive part of his intro. If he feels so strongly about this, it implies that so do all of the Conservative backbench MPs, but so do the public, and he has serious concerns that they will not win the next general election if they don't sort this out. And that should be a massive wake-up call for people, if indeed one were needed. But the government has said that they will continue to use every tool at their disposal to deter illegal migration. But with these rising numbers, who is actually to blame for this crisis? Now, it's going to be an interesting debate, and one that other media outlets might have shied away from, but I will not. Is the government to blame for this? Or is it actually the illegal immigrants, the people coming over here? Are they to blame for clogging up our asylum process? Joining me to have their views heard is Kevin Saunders, former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force, and Patrick O'Flynn, former MEP and political columnist. Patrick, I will start with you, and I hope people take this in the right way, because it's a question that I think does need to be answered. Who is to blame for the massive backlog in our asylum system? Is it the immigrants themselves, the asylum seekers themselves, or is it the politicians?
It's the British government, the British Conservative government, that's been lying to the British people about its policy on immigration, both legal and illegal, for more than a decade. This is clown show conservatism. So 50 of them have written a letter. Wow. Well, they're asking for changes to legislation, the modern slavery legislation, that the Conservatives brought in themselves. They're the ones who've let the backlogs run riot. It's irrelevant. I mean, let's not pretend it's all about Albania. At the moment, Albania is the biggest country of influx, but that varies. It goes to Iran, Afghanistan, other countries too. It's not just about Albania. The basic point is that nobody who comes to Britain illegally should be allowed to stay in Britain. And this is a decision the Australians made 15 years ago. They had a principle that they passed a law, no one would stay, and they made offshore processing the standard resolution, and the people who were held in offshore processing either went back to their countries of origin or to another country. Until the Conservatives bail out of the European Court of Human Rights, the jurisdiction, come out of international obligations which are now unsustainable, and impose that regime, no one should take them seriously on this issue.
Well, you mentioned that Australia clamped down rather hard on this. When it comes to the Albania problem, we know that the vast majority of these people are coming here via the small boat route, or as one of my viewers pointed out earlier on, the boats are getting increasingly larger, the medium-sized boat issue, it should be called. Well, it's not just the Australians. I mean, Germany have accepted, apparently, according to the stats, 0.0%, Sweden 0.0%, Netherlands, Switzerland, Austria, Norway, Luxembourg, Slovenia, Finland, Denmark, Iceland, Croatia, Liechtenstein, Czechia, whereas 55.4% of them apparently have been accepted by the UK government. That's according to the initial asylum applications acceptance rate. So there we are, bit of context there, people. I'm going to bring in now to the fray Kevin Saunders, former Chief Immigration Officer. On this issue, do you blame the people coming over here for clogging up our system, or do you blame the government?
Well, I think it's very difficult to blame the government, because we've had this problem since 2000. So we've had it under Labour, Conservative and Coalition. We've had massive amounts of people waiting to have asylum claims sorted out. The more people that come over, the more difficult it gets. But we could solve the Albanians tomorrow if we really wanted to. It's just that there seems to be a lack of I don't know, a lack of something to sort it out.
Kevin, there's a lot of no one wants this mass anti-immigrant or anti-asylum seeker sentiment. In fact, quite the opposite. I think people are very, very welcoming when it comes to genuine asylum seekers, and there is a huge concern that a lot of the people coming over on small boats are stopping us handling people who really are desperate for our help and do need asylum in this country. And so, is there any truth, Kevin, to the idea that we should be a bit more angry at some of the people coming over here because they're wasting taxpayers' money, they are trying to rig it, essentially, and abuse our system, and they are detracting from needy people? Is it fair enough that there is some anger about some people coming over on these medium-sized boats, Kevin?
Yes, there is, and so there should be. It's absolutely outrageous that this is going on, that it's been allowed to go on, and the fact that we can't remove the people to save countries. There was a lovely article in the press over the weekend about an Albanian lady who came across with her daughter and admitted to the press that she was an economic migrant. She couldn't earn enough money in Albania.
Oh, we've just lost Kevin there, which is all right because I've only got a couple of minutes left. Sorry, Kevin, you dropped off, but I got your point and the nation heard it loud and clear. I'll give the final word to Patrick O'Flynn, former MEP and political columnist on this issue now. When you are seeing people who are up in arms, like the people of Skegness, for example, who say, look, enough is enough when it comes to this, do you actually think there is any political will whatsoever to do anything about this? Because it doesn't appear to be the case, does it, that there is?
No, I think Rishi Sunak's an establishment Tory. He thinks being a good Prime Minister is being cuddled literally by the likes of Macron and Trudeau. He knows to take effective action on this. There would be some international blowback, although other countries like Italy and Sweden and Denmark might very well copy us. He's not going to pull Britain out of the European Court of Human Rights or bail out of the outdated international protocols. The Conservatives, why I keep saying they are a clown show, they have also presided over the takeover of our asylum system by ultra-liberal tribunals and judges. And those figures that you read out about 0.2, 0.4%, whatever, of Albanians getting asylum in other European countries and over 50% in the United Kingdom make the point about it. It's a multi-layered catastrophe of Conservative Party failure. They've run out of all credibility on this issue, including the 50 MPs who think, oh, I better sign a letter to make my constituents think I'm doing something. They're not.
No, look, fascinating, both of you. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. Patrick O'Flynn, their former MEP, political columnist. He's saying that realistically we need to be venting our anger towards the government when it comes to this. They should be doing more about it and should have been doing more about it. Got Kevin Saunders, their former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force, saying, well, actually, hang on a minute, we can't absolve the people coming over here of any blame because they are clogging our system up. Where do you stand at home? GBViews at GBNews.uk. A tough topic, but we don't shy away from tough topics here. As it's emerged that 450 people have crossed the channel today alone in 9 small boats, it is getting to squeaky bum time. Who do you actually blame for this? Is it some of the people coming over the channel? Is it our government for not sorting it? Next up on GB News, we've got the row about onshore wind farms. Is it just a lot of hot air? Don't worry, we'll make that more interesting than it sounds. Rishi Sunak is facing a Tory rebellion over onshore wind after former Cabinet Minister Alok Sharma joined Boris Johnson and Liz Truss in opposing the ban. Do you think onshore wind is just an eyesore? And are nurses' pay demands realistic? News today is that the Army could be called in to help cover strikes later this month. I have got a member of the Health Select Committee on. I want to know exactly what these demands are and exactly what the government is doing sitting around this negotiating table, because whatever the case is putting people's lives at risk. You and me, we're patients. We've got a right to know. I'll be back in a tick.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yeah, strap yourselves in, ladies and gents, because in about 10 minutes' time, after we've spoken about that wind farm issue, I am going to be talking to Caroline Johnson, Conservative MP, who is a member of the Health Select Committee. I want to get to the bottom of what's going on with this nurses' strike, or the NHS strike. They want about 19.2% pay rise. The government is saying, well, we can't afford it. But what's the government actually offering them? You and I are patients of the NHS, hopefully no time soon, everyone, but we will be at some point. We have a right to know. We have a right to know what is being done to stop nurses walking out. GBViews at GBnews.uk. We'll go to that shortly. But yes, the matter in hand now. Boris Johnson and Liz Truss have joined Tory fury on the backbenches as a rebellion brews against... Excuse me, I'd nearly choked on my own coffee there. A de facto ban on new onshore wind farms in a blow to Rishi Sunak's authority. This afternoon, the president of COP26 Climate Summit, Alok Sharma, also had his say opposing this ban. He said that he supports letting local communities decide. So, is this a sign of Rishi Sunak's leadership being challenged? And should he back down? How do you feel about it as well? I want to know. Joining me now is energy commentator Jamie Delaghi. Jamie, great to have you on the show. The fact is, onshore wind farms are hideously ugly and they ruin the landscape. If they were better looking and less obvious, do you not think more people would be inclined to back them?
It's a matter of opinion. I actually quite like wind farms. I might be in the minority here, but I really do think they add to the landscape. Now, I'm here in the middle of Belfast, so I'm not likely to have a wind farm next to me, so it's maybe easier for me to say that. But whether you like them or whether we don't, I think we've got to have them. And I think the government is seemingly coming round to the view that, yes, there could be new onshore wind farms where there is community consent, and I think that's emerging to this afternoon as a consensus view that the PM seems to be coming round to that point of view.
But I have a bit of an issue with this, Jamie, because it emerged to me anyway that when it came to the big fracking discussion, local communities stood to make, in some cases, by the way, billions of pounds from taking a share of the profits that some companies like Shell, etc., would make from fracking in your area. But communities weren't really given a vote on that because it was promised to them by the government, then it was taken away at the same time, not long after that. Well, why are they getting a vote now when it comes to wind farms? Is it just because you're not going to see Just Stop Oil or some of those orange-clad numpties rocking up to blockade a wind farm? Because if so, that's weak.
I think fracking is a completely different category from wind farms for a start. I mean, I'm not sure we should necessarily compare the two. I mean, wind farms are a tried and tested formula for creating renewable energy in this country. Fracking, there doesn't seem to be the same amount of evidence there. So, I mean, I do think that a move to ensure that people locally back them is very sensible. Maybe it should be done for more projects that could prove controversial. But it's good to see it as one imagines happening in this case. So I think good sense is emerging. I think there's no doubt we need wind farms. We absolutely need onshore. And actually, Rishi Sunak's instincts in this, where he was saying he wanted to concentrate on offshore, actually makes a lot of sense. You know, offshore, they're more efficient. Depends how far off the shore they are, but they can be out of sight. I mean, I think the PM's sympathies for offshore is completely right. But hopefully, I think we're going to see common sense prevail here. You know, if local people back them, then why not let them go ahead?
Well, this is the thing. My only point of relevance when it comes to joining together the fracking and the wind farm thing is if you offered members of the public in a rural village in Yorkshire or Cumbria or somewhere the option to have a bit of money off their energy bill or billions for a bit of fracking, I suspect they'd agree to both. And I can't understand why it is such a binary debate. But I'm going to have to ask you, Jamie, about this. Please sell a wind farm to me. Does it actually really... Will I notice the difference? We slap them across the landscape, right? What happens to my energy bills? What happens to us not having to rely on Putin for stuff? I mean, does it actually work and make a difference? Or is it just eco-tokenism?
No, they make a difference. Of course they do. I mean, the more wind farms we have, onshore, offshore, the more solar we have, means the less gas we use. So it means that we're not so dependent on importing fossil fuels. We're quite lucky in the UK that we have a very, it's a dwindling, but it's still a substantial amount of gas we can call upon. But the less we use of it, the better it is for the climate. So, you know, I think the argument is absolutely irrefutable. We must have more renewable energy. Wind farms absolutely serve that purpose, and I'm totally 100% back.
If a local, just very lastly and very quickly, sorry about this, if a local community that relies on tourism primarily because of its beautiful landscape decides that they absolutely, under no circumstances, want to have that landscape blighted by these giant spinny bird killers, should they have a right to be able to block it?
Oh, up to a point, I would say. It depends. You have to have a balance of opinion here. But if a community, yes, tourism interests should be taken into account, and if that is the primary source of income in the area, then maybe there is an argument for keeping the wind farms at bay. But look, I mean, that has to be pretty rare.
You'd happily have one outside your front door, would you?
I would certainly happily have them in the surrounding area, but it's not practical. It's not a sensible question to me because I live in the centre of the city.
It wouldn't fit here. No, it's all right. I'm only taking the mickey. Look, great to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Patrick.
Jamie Delargy there, who is an energy commentator. His views possibly, I think, shared by many people there. Look, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Up next, the Health Secretary says that the Department for Health was not formally contacted about the military stepping in to assist the NHS during planned walkouts. We're going to be talking about all of this because apparently the Army's going to have to come in on the 15th and the 20th of December because nurses are going to walk out. But I want to know, it shouldn't be hard to find this out, right? It shouldn't be hard to find this out. We have got Caroline Johnson from the Health Select Committee coming on in just a matter of minutes, ladies and gents, so make sure you don't move for this, because if nurses are going to walk out and our health service is going to go to the wall and people are going to be impacted on, people might die, you and I and everyone we know, in my opinion, has a right to know exactly what negotiations are taking place to try and stop that from happening. I buy into the fact that 19.2% as a pay rise is unaffordable. Both the Labour Party and the Tories agree with that right now. It will cost us about 10 billion quid. But it's all very well and good our health secretary saying his door remains open to negotiations. What is the negotiation? What is being done to stop people not getting chemo, not getting dialysis, people dying at home or in the back of an ambulance because they can't get seen to at a busy Christmas period? I want answers. I think you should as well. I'm going to get them for you in a matter of moments. But first, it's your headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. More than 50 Conservative MPs have signed a letter urging the Prime Minister to introduce emergency legislation to ease the migrant crisis. They want modern slavery laws changed so that people are returned to safe countries faster. They also say those who claim they've been trafficked should be sent back without objection. Signatories, including Sir Graham Brady and Esther McVeigh, believe it would deter people from crossing the Channel. GB News understands almost 450 people have been intercepted on 9 small boats so far today. The government is considering asking the armed forces to stand in for hospital staff during possible strikes this winter. Health officials are drawing up contingencies to cover frontline workers as ambulance drivers and paramedics consider joining nurses in their upcoming walkouts. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says they are concerned about the impact the action could have on patients. National Grid has decided not to introduce its energy savings scheme tomorrow, paying households if they cut power usage. The move would have seen the first ever live run of the operator's demand flexibility service, designed to ease pressure on the country's energy grid and avoid blackouts. And the government's launching a £1 billion scheme to make middle-income homes more energy efficient. The 3-year scheme will see hundreds of thousands of homes receive loft and cavity wall insulation from the spring. Households that don't currently get support to upgrade their homes will be prioritised, whilst a fifth of the funding will be set aside for the most vulnerable. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
OK, right now, Steve Barclay has arrived in Downing Street ahead of a meeting with the Prime Minister and NHS leaders. The Health Secretary entered number 10 with Chief Executive of the NHS England, Amanda Pritchard, as the health service faces a crisis due to the Royal College of Nursing announcing that its members will stage strikes. It will be the first in its 106-year history. Basically, let's have this in a little bit of a nutshell for you, ladies and gentlemen. Potential strikes on the 15th and the 20th of December. They're scheduled to go ahead. Why? Primarily, it is pay. They're trying to wrap it up in patient care as well, but realistically, it's about pay. They want about a 19.2% pay rise. The government is saying that that will cost 10 billion quid and it's unaffordable. The Labour opposition is also saying it's unaffordable. But in Scotland, they've managed to stave off nurses' strikes by giving them 7.5%, or at least saying they will anyway, on top of the 4% they had earlier this year and the 3% they had the year before that. I am very angry about all of this, as I'm sure every single person is. Two sides to this. Obviously, deep sympathy for nurses. They save lives. Hurrah. OK, fantastic stuff. However, people will die and people will become increasingly unwell and not get care they need if nurses do go on strike. And that is infuriating. Every single person in this country has the absolute right to know what our government is doing to try to stop these strikes, no matter what side of the fence you're on. The government has to be trying to do something, surely, to stop these strikes. And here to talk to me about all of this. Well, we're going shortly, actually. We're going shortly to a member of the Health Select Committee. But I just want to remind ourselves of why the NHS apparently is facing this crisis. The Royal College of Nursing is demanding workers receive a pay rise of 5% above inflation. That's currently at 11.1%. That would take an average nurse's salary from 34,000 to 39,780. So those numbers are worth bearing in mind. Members of the Royal College of Nursing will walk out, England and Wales and Northern Ireland, on the 15th and 20th of December. On Friday, we found out that any walkout in Scotland has been postponed by that potential pay rise for them there. The government is saying that demands from the Royal College of Nursing are closer to 19.2% pay rise. That's the number I'm using, and it would cost about 10 billion quid a year. But it's not really saying what it will do to mitigate that. Finally, let's look at what's on the table. As I mentioned, strike action in Scotland is on hold now. They've been given or offered a 7.5% increase. But in England and Wales, NHS staff were awarded a pay rise of 4% earlier this year. So I've given you some context on all of this. I've given you enough time to formulate, to ruminate on your own decisions. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Get in touch. Do you think these demands are reasonable? And joining me now, and I'm very grateful for it, is Dr Caroline Johnson, Conservative MP and, crucially, member of the Commons Health and Social Care Committee. Great to have you on the show. What is the government offering the Royal College of Nursing in line with its 19.2% demand? What's the offer back?
Well, first I should say I'm not a member of the government, but my understanding is that the government's offer is a minimum of 4% for band 5 to 7 nurses. So these are most of the nurses that you'll see on wards, with a minimum of £1,400 uplift. So, for example, a band 5 nurse would see an uplift of 5.46% by the time they've had their £1,400.
And is that on top of the, roughly speaking, 4% that was given earlier this year and, I believe, the 3% that was given the year before? So this is a standalone uplift in the region of around 5.6% when you toss it all up.
So my understanding is that this money comes on top of the 3% that they were given last year, when everyone, and it's worth noting that everyone else in the public sector had their pay frozen last year. But the nurses had an NHS agenda for change. People had uplifted 3%. But like I say, I'm not here as a member of the government, so I don't have.
No, I absolutely get that, and I really want to make it very clear to everybody who's watching and listening to this that I'm acutely aware you're not a member of the government. I don't want it to come across as I'm holding you account in any way for government decisions. It's just we don't know because the government won't really tell us what they want, and this is why I want to get someone like you on with a bit more insight on this. So. I'm keen to just really kind of get down to the granular detail on this. So as we understand it then, the nurses want 19.2% as a pay rise. That would cost us around 10 billion quid. As far as you're aware, the government is saying that we will give you 5.6%, as far as you're aware. And that's that.
That's not what I said. As far as I'm aware, they're offering generally 4%, but for those on lower salaries, they're having a minimum of £1,400, which takes it to 5.46%, according to the figures I was given.
OK, all right. And the general consensus, as far as you're concerned, something you now surely can specifically comment on, is that enough? They should take that and not go on strike?
Sorry, the screen froze and I missed part of that question.
All right. Do you feel as though that's a good enough offer from the government, if indeed it is the case, and they should not go on strike as a result?
Well, I certainly think that 19.2% is too high a figure. I mean, nurses do a fantastic job. As a doctor, I work alongside some really amazing nurses during my career. But 19.2% is 3 times the average private sector pay deal, and it's clearly something that in the current context that is not affordable. In terms of striking, I saw some figures at the weekend about women waiting for gynecological appointments, and those figures showed that before the pandemic, 54 women were waiting more than a year to see a gynecologist, and that number is now over 40,000 women. And when that's just gynecology, when we're looking at a backlog of that scale, when people are waiting in discomfort for operations and procedures and appointments of various sorts, I just think to go on strike at this point will only increase that wait, will only increase the suffering for people. And so I would urge them to look at, Steve Barclay has said his door is open for negotiations, and I hope that they will come to some sort of agreement before I think it's the 15th of December.
Yes. Now, if indeed that, roughly speaking, 4% is on the table, that's the government's negotiating point. The nurses are saying 19.2%, which pretty much every single political party, and I think anyone with any common sense would say is a ridiculous figure. Clearly, there has to be some wiggle room there somewhere, otherwise we get strikes. How high do you think, in your opinion, the government should go? Scotland, supposedly, they've offered 7.5%, and that's stopped the strikes.
Well, I mean, I think, with these, the government has an independent pay review body, and they look at all of the information and make a decision. And the government has accepted the independent pay reviews guidance. It's not for people like me to pick a figure out of the air and say, oh, that's enough or this is not enough. It's clear that 19.2% is too high and unaffordable. What the exact figure should be is chosen by an independent pay review body, and the government has accepted that. And not only has it accepted the recommendations to the independent pay review, it's also, Steve Barclay has also said his door is open to negotiations. So, I think the government have gone that far. And
yes, but
I very much just quickly, go ahead for the sake of our patients.
OK, all right. Just quickly on this then, but it's all very well and good him saying his door is... Oh, sorry about this. I've got to go. Apparently there's some breaking news. Please, sorry about that. Thank you there. I believe that... Oh, grief. Rishi Sunak's turning on the Christmas lights at Downing Street. Let's have a look. There we go. Right, OK, fantastic. The lights are on, but no one's at home, quite literally. Rishi Sunak, though...
Providing the excellent entertainment this evening. Thank you to you all. Look, at its heart, the Christmas story is one of hospitality and compassion. So Akshata and I are both really pleased to be able to welcome here tonight to join us many of our friends from Ukraine who have found shelter here in Britain, but also winners of our Points of Lights Award, and of course our serving men and women from Catterick Garrison all the way in my own constituency. So without further ado, let's start this countdown. Are you ready? Yeah? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Joe, here you go. Joe.
Thank you.
OK, well, that was Rishi Sunak turning on the Christmas lights outside Downing Street, surrounded by Ukrainian refugees and what looks like a band. Great. OK, right, well, let's go back to our health stuff, I think, because this NHS nurses strike possibly affects more people than whether or not Rishi Sunak... Well, frankly, we're paying the electricity bill for that, aren't we? But there we go. A nice touch, some would say. Maybe I'm being cynical. Don't call me the Grinch. Don't at me. I believe we can now go back to Caroline Johnson, who... Yes, there we go. Sorry about that, Caroline. You got biffed for the Christmas lights at one point there. I am assuming you will not be using the taxpayers' money to pay for any of your Christmas parties, but I haven't got you on to talk about that, so I won't... Is it enough for our Health Secretary to say that his door is open for negotiations, not to be proactively seeking them? Because if I was waiting for chemotherapy or dialysis and the nurses have said to me, we are definitely striking on the 15th or the 20th, I might want the Health Secretary to go to them rather asking them to come to him.
I think you're playing with semantics there. I mean, I think the key is, have we got a Health Secretary that's willing to engage? And we do. And that's, for me, is the key point. We have a Health Secretary who's keen to engage. We have a Health Secretary and a government that have taken on board the views of the independent pay review body, whose job it is to look at all the factors and see what the appropriate pay review response is. And we have a government that, despite the very difficult times that we find ourselves in at the moment, has still protected the NHS, has still increased the number of people working in the NHS in terms of 4,000 more doctors, 9,000 more nurses. We've got more scans, more procedures, all sorts of additional activity happening. Yes, demand is high, the backlog is huge, but we don't improve that by having a strike.
And it would appear to me, anyway, well, over the weekend, Lisa Nandy said that she agrees that this is unaffordable, completely a 19.2% pay rise, even if they come down from that. I mean, frankly, you'd have to go quite a long way down from 19.2% for it to be affordable. You are on the committee response to this. There would appear to be cross-party support saying this is a ridiculous idea and they need to lower their demands, which would, frankly, mean that no matter who was in charge right now, whether it was the Labour or the Conservative Party, the nurses still wouldn't be getting what they want.
Well, if 19.2% is what they want, then at the moment that is, I believe, unaffordable. I think it's worth noticing, however, that this vote was done trust by trust, and not all trusts will be on strike. There are quite a substantial number of trusts. I can't remember if it's 40% are on strike or 40% are not on strike, but certainly a substantial number of trusts. The threshold was not met for strike action, so they won't be striking.
Could I just ask you a question very quickly, because I'm being pressed for time here? If patients suffer poor care and become ill or die as a result, which we hope never happens, as a result of these strikes, would you support them trying to sue for medical negligence for people striking over a potential 19.2% pay rise, given how unreasonable that demand is?
I think the key thing is that we ensure these strikes don't happen, and I really urge the people...
I've got to press you on this because I can see this coming. If they do and people suffer, would you support them pushing for medical negligence claims?
I don't think that. I think the key thing is, look, the NHS is under pressure. It's had record amounts of investment, but with the COVID backlog, it's got a record amount of demands as well. And I think we all need to work together to support it. And that doesn't. And I don't think suing the NHS in those contexts would really help the NHS. And I don't think asking for 19.2% pay rise helps the NHS either. I think we need to pull together and support. We're very lucky to have a fabulous health service with the most wonderful staff. And remember, they get wonderful outcomes every day. They treat millions of people every day. And I think we need to treasure that. We need to look after it.
All right, look, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you making the time for us and hanging on while Rishi Sunak turned the lights on as well. That was lovely. Dr Caroline Johnson, Conservative MP, member of the Commons Health and Social Care Committee. Really fascinating that. Right, we got somewhere, didn't we? We got somewhere when it came to actually finding out what the government has offered them. Roughly speaking, a 4% pay rise on top of the 4% pay rise they had elsewhere this year and 3% earlier. For some of the people right on the bottom, that might equate to a 5.6% pay rise. They, as in the nurses now, when I'm saying this, want about a 19.2% pay rise. So we've got a little bit of progress in terms of what the government is offering them. Do you think the government should offer them any more? Do you think that's about right? Fascinating. Would not be drawn as well when it came to the issue of potential, I can see this coming a mile off, by the way, medical negligence claims for people striking, if they do, striking based on completely unreasonable demands, unaffordable demands, and patients suffering as a result. I can see those medical negligence claims coming an absolute mile off. GBViews at GBNews.uk. But moving on, can Matt Hancock, oh gosh grief, from one crisis to another, continue in his political career? The former Health Secretary came third in the reality show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here last night. But does this mean all is forgiven? Do you forgive Matt Hancock? Do you think he had anything to be forgiven for? There we go. We will be back in just a tick when we talk about little Matty Hancock.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Right, little Matty Hancock time, people. Are you and I'm a Celebrity fan? Are you a Matt Hancock fan? Do you think he should have been given the chance to resurrect what remained of his political career? But it looks as though he wants to continue as a local MP. His spokesperson, which is presumably just his lover, says that no intention of standing down. He has no intention of standing down from politics as the former Health Secretary faces a fresh set of questions about his future following his appearance on the hit ITV show. Mr Hancock surpassed expectations of many as he reached last night's final. He came third in a public vote and he lost out, I think rightly so, really, to the Lioness and National Treasure Euro 2022 champion Lioness Jill Scott and Hollyoaks actor Owen Warner, who did remarkably well for a chap who struggles to string a sentence together. But what's next for Matt Hancock? Joining me now is entertainment journalist and broadcaster Sam Dowler. Sam, I found myself falling into a terrible trap. I don't like Matt Hancock. I think he has a very unfortunate face. He looks like a strange mixture of a high-pressure double glazing salesman and a Labrador trying to lick an ice cream from the wrong side of a window pane. And I don't forgive him for everything that went on during the coronavirus crisis, but I must say I thought he was good in the jungle. Who am I, Sam? What have I become?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Reality TV and politics are two very different, but also almost quite similar things. I mean, obviously, we've had, Nadine Dorries was in the jungle. I mean, I'm sure people would forget because she was voted out straight away. And obviously, you had Penny Mordaunt on The Splash, making a splash. And but obviously this is a far more contentious issue because of obviously what happened during the pandemic and because of his flouting the rules, etc. But I have to say, obviously the Tory party have their approval rating is in the doldrums, and this is a man who's come third in what 12 million viewers, etc. So I mean, the British people are obviously willing to forgive certain things, and ultimately we are a democracy. If he wants to stand again in the next general election, it's up to his constituents whether they want to or not.
Are there question marks over whether or not ITV should have let this happen? Because it was the public resuscitation of a man who made decisions that did mean that some people, if you'll excuse the rather crass analogy, could not be resuscitated. People died in care homes, people died over the course of the pandemic, and ITV chose to revive him, didn't they? And I've said it before, I'll say it again. What next? Is it Shamima Begum in the jungle?
Well, you might find her in the Celebrity Big Brother house, perhaps. This is like ITV, Channel 5, I mean, all the channels, it's about ratings, isn't it? And, and the fact that we talked about it non-stop means that ITV got exactly what they wanted. He was worth every penny that they paid him. Obviously, it's you read the vitriol online, you hear what presenters on GBNews say, they didn't want him to be in there, but and even seeing him having to do horrific things, it is. Being a celebrity is a huge privilege, and and he's slipped into it, and done more PR wise for the Tory party than any of them have done, because everybody hates them.
There's that. Well, not quite everyone, but I'll let you have that one. That's look. You make a series of good points. All right, you do make a series of good points. It's short and sweet, Sam, I'm afraid, but much needed. Thank you very much, Sam Dowler, there, who's an entertainment journalist and broadcaster. I am increasingly on the fence about Matt Hancock, and I think that the reason why he's really famous is because he was health, if you can call it that, is because he was health secretary during a pandemic, and I think he balls that up. And therefore, I don't think he should be reaping in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not, when you tot it all up, given the other reality work he's going to do, millions of pounds, becoming rich off the back, in my opinion, of some of the mistakes and scandals that he was in charge of. That said, he did do some good things. We had the vaccine rollout. Was he just following the orders from some of the medical community as well? So there is that side of it, very much so. But he came across to me rather well, and also, I must say as well, rather intelligent. And I'm going to come back to this, just bear with me, because I am going to return to that. I actually think Matt Hancock did all right in the jungle, but I hate to say it. But there we go. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, who's to blame for the migrant crisis? The migrants themselves or the process in place? Are nurses' strike demands unreasonable? And, yes, what is next for Matt Hancock? Back to politics or a career in show business and millions in the bank? Don't go anywhere. I'll be back in a tick.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's just gone 5 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, and coming your way in the next hour is action-packed because the latest in the migrant crisis has hundreds of migrants arrive in small boats. They're not so small, these boats, anymore, after bad weather prevented them from crossing after the past fortnight.
If they're here for a couple of years, they'll meet somebody, get married, have children, and then the story's over.
Yes, indeed. David Davis, Conservative MP, is leading a group of now 50 Tory MPs who have written to the Prime Minister personally to implement a change in the law to reduce the numbers of migrants making the dangerous journey to the UK, essentially taking our legal system for a ride. They're claiming to be victims of modern slavery. Well, if they were trafficked here against their will, surely they'd want to go back. More with this with our Home and Security Editor Mark White a few moments ago. Also, I've just had it in my ear, breaking news about the number of diphtheria cases at the Manston Detention Centre. You're not going to want to miss that. Also this hour, though, could we see the Army drafted in to support the NHS when staff walk out?
Look at our contingency plans and ensure we're as best prepared as we can, recognising that there will be impacts on patients.
Apparently, the Health Secretary says he's not formally contacted the military about stepping in, although we did have some figures revealed pretty much exclusively here, as far as I'm aware, on GB News moments ago. The former Health Committee member, a current Health Committee member, I should say, about exactly what the government is doing when it comes to stopping these strikes. And can Matt Hancock really return to the Westminster bubble after his appearance on I'm a Celeb, Get Me Out of It?
Just wanted to show what I'm just like as a person. People have, lots of people come to me with preconceived ideas.
They do, indeed, Matt. Yes, they do. Anyway, he came third in the competition last night, so has all been forgiven? Millions of people voted for him. A mixed bag in my inbox. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Some of you saying you absolutely love the guy. Some of you saying that he's got nothing to be sorry for. Others, frankly, hate him. I want to hear from you. That email address, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Do you say no to any more migrant hotels? And have you forgiven little Matty Hancock? Stay tuned.
Good afternoon, it's 3 minutes past 5. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. More than 50 Conservative MPs have signed a letter urging the Prime Minister to introduce emergency legislation to ease the migrant crisis. They want modern slavery laws changed so that people are returned to safe countries faster. They also say those who claim they've been trafficked should be sent back without objection. Signatories including Sir Graham Brady and Esther McVeigh believe it would deter people from crossing the Channel. GB News understands almost 450 people have been intercepted on 9 small boats so far today. The letter's author, MP David Davis, says the change would mean migrants could be sent home within days of arriving.
So if we got the gumption to do it with all new arrivals, from a safe country, I don't mean from Syria or Afghanistan where they may have a claim, but from a safe country, then frankly, it should knock out almost all of the 12,000 a year that we're looking at the moment.
The government's considering asking the armed forces to stand in for hospital staff during possible strikes this winter. Health officials are drawing up contingencies to cover frontline workers as ambulance drivers and paramedics consider joining nurses in their upcoming walkouts. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says they're concerned about the impact the action could have on patients.
Well, no formal request has been made by the Department of Health to the military, but of course we will look as part of our normal contingency plans at a range of options. The priority for me is to continue the dialogue with the trade unions, with the RCN. I've been extremely clear that my door is open. They have raised a range of issues, not just pay, but also about working conditions, patient safety, And so I'm very happy to continue that dialogue.
The Foreign Secretary is backing the right to peaceful protests in China over COVID restrictions. Protesters turned out again this evening, despite a strong police presence. It follows demonstrations at the weekend, which started after 10 people were killed in a fire at an apartment block. Protesters blame quarantine measures, saying they prevented the victims from escaping. James Cleverly says the Chinese government should take notice of these rare protests.
It's rare that the Chinese people protest publicly like this. They know the risks. In fact, some of the protesters are saying they know the risks, but it's something they feel incredibly strongly about. And as I say, because they are a rarity, I think that both the international community should take notice, but more importantly, the Chinese government itself should listen to what the Chinese people are saying to them.
National Grid has decided not to introduce its energy savings scheme tomorrow, paying households if they cut power usage. The move would have been the first ever live run of the operator's demand flexibility service, designed to ease pressure on the country's energy grid and avoid blackouts. The government's launching a £1 billion scheme to make middle-income homes more energy efficient. The 3-year scheme will see hundreds of thousands of homes receive loft and cavity wall insulation from the spring. Households that don't currently get support to upgrade their homes will be prioritised, whilst a fifth of the funding will be set aside for the most vulnerable. Business Secretary Grant Shapps told us the measures will help households reduce their energy consumption.
This £1 billion, which is in addition to a lot more money that's been provided previously, is to allow anyone in any kind of housing, could be private rent, it could be their own home, could be social housing, to improve the property in order to make sure that it meets those higher standards. And that will save people, quite a lot of money.
Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told GB News Labour wants to insulate 19 million homes as soon as possible.
It's about 10 years too late. I mean, this should have been a quick early win for the government, reducing people's fuel bills and doing the right thing by the environment. I mean, it's a win-win. Why has it taken so long? This government have neither the ambition or the direction. Of course, I welcome when they come a little bit onto our territory, whether it's a windfall tax or greater energy efficiency ambition, but they've got nowhere near the comprehensive programme they need to get this country onto the right path.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Yes, OK, ladies and gentlemen, that breaking news, you can see it there. When the big news breaks, it breaks right here with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, because in the last few moments, the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, has now confirmed there's been 50 cases of diphtheria reported in asylum accommodation. Earlier this afternoon, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, insisted the risk to the public getting diphtheria is, quote, very low, despite a rise in the number of infections being recorded among asylum seekers and, clearly, those people being dispersed, it would appear now, willy-nilly, right across the country. It comes as GB News understands that almost 450 people in 9 small boats have crossed the Channel today, and more than 50 Conservative MPs have written to Rishi Sunak calling on a crackdown for these illegal crossings. We have a migrant crisis, we have a health crisis, and we have a legal crisis when it comes to everything that's going on in the Channel. It's a hot mess. Joining me in the studio now is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, let's start with the latest line, which is the diphtheria numbers concerning.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's concerning. We were told a couple of weeks ago that there was 4 people had tested positive for diphtheria who'd gone into the Manston Processing Centre in Kent. Now that figure has been revised upwards to 50. And the more worrying aspect of that is that there's no one at Manston anymore. So you can then assume that those 50 individuals have been sent off to accommodation around the country, hotel accommodation mainly in hotels right around the country. Now, the government is trying to accentuate the positive or try to allay fears by suggesting that it's not a wider threat to the UK population because the vast majority of people in this country will have been inoculated for diphtheria when they were a child. However, we do know that just in the last 10, 20 years, the population of the country has grown by more than 6 or 7 million people who've come in, largely often from countries where diphtheria inoculations will not have been on offer. So they may well not be immune. They fall ill, that's going to impact the health service. So it is a concern.
It is a massive concern for people, and people have a right to be concerned. And it's important that we tread carefully here, but not so much that things get swept under the carpet. Anyone out there right now does have a right to be concerned about public health when it comes to the dispersion of migrants across the country in various different hotels. When we look at the diphtheria cases, that's not to say this trope of, people come here carrying diseases, making us all ill. But the fact is that clearly diphtheria is an issue, and the conditions that they've lived in or been moving through Europe in, etc., have contributed to that. And now people in local rural areas or cities have a right to be genuinely concerned about whether or not their health could be impacted as a result of certain people being plonked into their area. But it's not just that, Mark, is it? Because, as you rightly said earlier on, it's not just a health crisis, this. There is a numbers crisis and a potential legal crisis when it comes to the government as well. More numbers today crossing the channel.
Yeah, I think the important thing on the health side to get over is health officials are saying that these people are coming across the channel having contracted a disease prior to entering the UK, and we know that conditions in these makeshift camps in areas around Dunkirk and Calais are pretty horrendous at times, and these individuals can be there for days, weeks, months at a time. So there is a real concern that public health officials, as well as border officials, have to grapple with these individuals coming into the UK. And they are coming, as you say, Patrick, in ever greater numbers. We've had, because of bad weather, a break, a lull, if you like, in the numbers crossing the channel for about a fortnight. But today we had to break, or the weather conditions improved to the point where the sea conditions in the channel, the waves were non-existent, flat calm really, and that allowed more boats to come across. 9 small boats, almost 450 people. I've been taking a look at the latest numbers coming across and the pressures on the government. Just after first light, the Border Force vessel Typhoon could be seen approaching Dover Harbour, with the first of hundreds of migrants picked up in the channel this morning. Around 50 people were taken on board Typhoon for the journey to the Dover Processing Centre. For more than a fortnight, bad weather has largely scuppered attempts by the criminal gangs to push boats off the beaches of northwestern France. In fact, since the 13th of November, just one small boat with 36 people on board has made it across the English Channel. But conditions are now flat calm, meaning some of the thousands who've been waiting in various makeshift camps around Dunkirk and Calais are being funnelled down to the beaches and onto the boats. Increasingly frustrated at the government's seeming inability to get a grip on the crisis, around 50 Conservative MPs have written to the Prime Minister, demanding he introduce emergency legislation to deal in particular with the number of Albanians arriving in small boats. They want all Albanians rapidly removed back to their own country, and any who claim to have been trafficked also returned home.
One of the problems is the longer you take, the more appeals you get. There's a harsh truth that if they're here for a couple of weeks, they'll find a British lawyer and away they go. If they're here for a couple of years, they'll meet somebody, get married, have children, and then the story's over. They can stay because they have family rights. So the quicker you do it, the better.
Are you concerned about the spread of other diseases, Home Secretary?
It is yet more pressure on the Home Secretary, already dealing with the consequences of dozens of migrants who were infected with diphtheria being farmed out to various hotels around the UK, even though they were highly infectious.
The Home Secretary and I were updated on the situation over the weekend by Dame Jenny Harries of the UK HSA, who confirmed to us that 50 cases of diphtheria have been reported in asylum accommodation. It's important to emphasise that the UK HSA has been clear that the risk to the wider UK population from onward transmission of diphtheria is very low, thanks in no small part to our excellent childhood immunisation programme.
It is a growing health crisis within a migrant crisis that shows no sign of slowing. With good weather conditions throughout most of this week, authorities are braced for the possibility that thousands more could cross the channel in the days ahead. Mark White, GB News.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, so two big bits of breaking news when it comes to what's been going on in the Channel and the related asylum seeker crisis there that took place during this show. The first one is that at least 450 people, as we understand it, have arrived today in 9 not-so-small boats. But the other big one that's happened just moments ago is that Robert Jenrick has confirmed that there have been 50 cases of diphtheria reported at asylum seeker accommodation. Huge concerns for people about this. Yes, I understand that the government is saying the risk is relatively small. Yes, I understand that we have quite high inoculation against diphtheria and other illnesses as well. However, it is still a concern for people, and people have a right to be concerned about the dispersal of these people right across the country. And look, when it comes to the sheer numbers of it, people were told, oh, you're not really allowed to have a view on that because that would make you a racist. And the numbers get published and it's absolutely shocking, and they come on top of the net migration figures above 500,000, and all of a sudden it looks like maybe we do have a right to be a bit concerned about it. But then, of course, you know, we say, well, hang on a minute, not all of these people look like children or as though they may be actually fleeing a war zone. Oh, you can't possibly say that because then that makes you a racist. And then it turns out that Albania is actually a safe country and people possibly quite could be sent back there. So you are now allowed to say that. And now it's coming back lines of, well, you're not really allowed to say that you don't want these people in hotels in your area because that makes you a racist. And then they start plonking them in hotels up and down the country, including in rural areas, ruining a lot of local economies and putting up the bill for local councils upwards of £1 million and clogging up public services. Well, you now may be allowed a view on that. And then it goes, well, you can't really say that I'm fearing for public health if some of these people, maybe they are bringing with them sight diseases. Oh, no, you can't say that because that makes you a racist. Now it's happening, isn't it? So there we go. Anyway, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Stay tuned because we're going to return to that big discussion a little bit about the actual public health concerns when it comes to what's going on in the Channel. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But kind of sticking with a little health theme, actually, because the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, has insisted his door is open to resuming talks with health unions as he arrives in Downing Street ahead of talks with the Prime Minister. It's because, basically, there's going to be a massive strike, a nurses' strike, the 15th and the 20th of December. Just here's what he had to say earlier.
Priority for me is to continue the dialogue with the trade unions, with the RCN. I've been extremely clear that my door is open. They have raised a range of issues, not just pay, but also about working conditions, patient safety. And so I'm very happy to continue that dialogue with the RCN. But alongside that, it's right that with NHSE colleagues, with hospital leaders, that we look at our contingency plans and ensure we're as best prepared as we can, recognising that there will be impacts on patients if the strikes go ahead.
Yes, right, but this works both ways, ladies and gentlemen, and you and I and everyone we know is a customer of the NHS. And we are customers because we pay for it, OK? The NHS is not free. We all pay a walloping boatload of cash in order to have a National Health Service. And we have a right to know what the government is doing to stop these strikes. Nurses want 19.2%. The government was very, very quiet and remains very quiet on what it actually is offering them in return. I had to speak to Conservative MP and member of the Health Select Committee, Caroline Johnson, to delve down in this and get you some answers.
My understanding is that this money comes on top of the 3% that they were given last year when everyone, and it's worth noting that everyone else in the public sector had their pay frozen last year, but the nurses had, and the NHS Agenda for Change people had uplift of 3%. Well, I certainly think that 19.2% is too high a figure. I mean, nurses do a fantastic job. As a doctor, I work alongside some really amazing nurses during my career. But 19.2% is 3 times the average private sector pay deal. And it's clearly something that in the current context that is not affordable. In terms of striking, I saw some figures at the weekend about women waiting for gynecological appointments, and those figures showed that before the pandemic, 54 women were waiting more than a year to see a gynecologist, and that number is now over 40,000 women. And when, that's just gynecology. When we're looking at a backlog of that scale, when people are waiting in discomfort for operations and procedures and appointments of various sorts, I just think to go on strike at this point will only increase that wait, will only increase the suffering for people. And so I would urge them to look at, Steve Barclay has said his door is open for negotiations, and I hope that they will come to some sort of agreement before, I think it's the 15th of December.
Yes, but also, rather crucially, one other thing she actually did say to me, which was that she understands that the government has said, OK, we'll give you another 4%. So we'll give nurses another 4% on top of the 4% they had earlier this year and the 3% they had the year before that. For those at the very lowest end of the NHS pay scale, the nurses' pay scale, as she understood it there, Caroline Johnson, who's a member of the Health Select Committee and a Conservative MP and a doctor, no less. She thought that would be 5.6%, which would equate to roughly 1,400 quid for people who are right at the lowest end of the pay scale, which I think is an interesting offer. In Scotland, they've managed to stave off strikes for now by offering them 7.5%. I just want to give you a little bit more detail on this, the demands from the Royal College of Nursing and what's on the table. So the Royal College of Nursing is demanding workers receive a pay rise of 5% above inflation. Inflation is currently around 11.1%. That takes an average nurse's salary from £34,000, I should say, to £39,780. Members of the Royal College of Nursing will walk out in England, Wales and Northern Ireland on the 15th and 20th of December. On Friday, we found out that any walkout in Scotland has been postponed, not cancelled, postponed, after the government there reopened NHS pay negotiations. It's believed that they want to offer them around 7%, but there we go. The government say that the demands from the Royal College of Nursing are closer to a 19.2% pay rise, which both this government and the Labour frontbenchers admit is unaffordable. It would cost us, you and I, the taxpayer, around 10 billion quid a year if they met those demands. But finally, let's look at what's on the table. As I mentioned, strike action in Scotland is on hold after the Scottish Government's final pay offer averaged 7.5%. They called that strike off, for now at least. In England and Wales, NHS staff were awarded a pay rise of 4% earlier this year. Now, that was awarded earlier this year. Importantly, and this is the big development that we've had so far on this show, is, as we understand it, they may have been offered another 4% on top of that. That was the big line we managed to coax out of someone on the Health Select Committee there. So whether or not you believe that's enough, that would be, roughly speaking, 8% in a year, wouldn't it? I appreciate inflation's through the roof, but, 19.2% is a bit rich. Well, someone who can talk to us about the practicalities of drafting in the army, because that's what we might be about to do, potentially drafting in the military in order to deal with this, is former British Army commander and chairman of Cobra Intelligence Group, Colonel Richard Kemp. The Colonel will see you now, as it were. Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Will this actually work? It's one thing saying drafting in the army. We get that all the time. There's no milk on the shelves at Tesco. Bring the army in. Oh, we can't do this. Bring the army in. There's border forces knackered. Bring the army in. Well, all right, fine. But if I need a tracheotomy fitted on the pavement, can we bring the army in?
I'm not sure any of your listeners or your viewers will want to see this particular colonel if they had a medical problem. But, yeah, I mean, the armed forces, not just the army, but the Navy and the Air Force as well, although the army normally bears the brunt of these things, the armed forces will be able to provide assistance. Now, there are medical people within the forces, including doctors, nurses, and other medical staff. And, of course, sort of people who can drive ambulances and who can carry out other ancillary duties for the NHS if needed. But, of course, all of these things have an impact on the army itself. There are a huge number of members of the forces today who are involved in the war in Afghanistan, not in Ukraine, I beg your pardon, not actually employed there, but in supporting the effort, training Ukrainian troops, etc., etc., etc. And many of the others should be preparing and training in case the worst happens, and the worst could happen. It gets more and more dangerous every day, the world.
Well, can I just ask, because we're a bit tight for time, Colonel Richard, would there not be a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth if nurses have been offered, as we understand it in some cases, a 5.6% pay rise on top of the 4% pay rise they had earlier this year, on top of the 3% pay rise they got last year? If they now strike, because they want a 19.2% pay rise, and the people who have to come in to fill that void are members of our armed forces, who I dare say are on average maybe on a similar amount, and certainly have not been given anything like that amount of pay rise in the last few years. That presumably would leave quite a bad taste in the mouth for a lot of people in our armed forces, would it not?
I don't think so, really. I mean, they'll notice that, and they will think, well, why are we standing in for these people when they're better paid than we are?
Yes.
And we're not getting a decent pay rise. Of course there'll be that, but the beauty of our armed forces is that whatever they're told to do, they go on and do it, and they don't worry about these sort of things unduly. Some of them will lose their leave as a result of having to get involved in this, so they will suffer personally and directly. But nevertheless, as always, they will just get on with it and do their duty for the country.
Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the job they signed up to, isn't it? Could nurses learn a thing or two from our armed forces?
I think many nurses could, and many members of the country, many people in different jobs could learn something from the armed forces. Get on and do your duty, and recognise that the country is going through enormous difficulties, and perhaps this isn't the time to add to those difficulties. And I think members of the armed forces set a very, very good example to pretty much everybody else when it comes to knowing what your duty is and where your duty lies.
Yeah, I think you've put that incredibly well. Thank you very, very much. That is, well, frankly, an absolute top dog. Former British Army commander and the chairman of the Cobra Intelligence Group, Colonel Richard Kemp, reacting to this news that supposedly, anyway, nurses will be going on strike the 15th and the 20th of December in England and in Wales and in Northern Ireland, and that comes despite the fact that we revealed right here on GB News that the latest understanding is that they have been offered, in some cases, a 5.6% pay rise on top of the 4% pay rise they had earlier, on top of the 3% pay rise they had before that, and they might be striking, and we'll have to bring the army in, who are on average similar to a less wage and certainly have not had that kind of dollop of cash sent their way, despite the job they do, by the way. The nurses might strike over a 19.2% pay rise. The irony, do you not think, of people filling in for nurses on potentially less money without any kind of demand for that kind of pay rise, despite doing a much more dangerous job. Why? Because it's their duty. I'm sorry, but I'm going off this nurses strike even more than I was before. Anyway, there we go. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, former Prime Minister Tony Blair... Sorry, I was sick of my own mouth. Tony Blair has advised our current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, that he should seek a new Brexit trade deal with the EU. Is Tony Blair right? I'll save us a lot of time and say no. Is there an appetite for a closer relationship with the European Union, or should he just keep quiet and go away? Yeah, that one. Also, before 6 o'clock, we will have our big debate on the migrant crisis. 2 breaking bits of info for you right here on this show. We have the numbers coming over today, 450 and 9 not-so-small boats, and 50 cases, at least, of diphtheria. I'm worried about public health and safety. I'm sure you are as well. We're going to get stuck right into that very, very shortly. All right, we'll be back in a tick. Don't go away.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Good afternoon, it's 5:30. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. More than 50 Conservative MPs have signed a letter urging the Prime Minister to introduce emergency legislation to ease the migrant crisis. They want modern slavery laws changed so that people are returned to safe countries faster. They also say those who claim they've been trafficked should be sent back without objection. Signatories, including Sir Graham Brady and Esther McVeigh, believe it would deter people from crossing the Channel. GB News understands almost 450 people have been intercepted on 9 small boats so far today. The government is considering asking the armed forces to stand in for hospital staff during possible strikes this winter. Health officials are drawing up contingencies to cover frontline workers as ambulance drivers and paramedics consider joining nurses in their upcoming walkouts. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says they are concerned about the impact the action could have on patients. National Grid has decided not to introduce its energy savings scheme tomorrow, paying households if they cut power usage. The move would have been the first ever live run of the operator's demand flexibility service, designed to ease pressure on the country's energy grid and avoid blackouts. And the government's launching a £1 billion scheme to make middle-income homes more energy efficient. The 3-year scheme will see hundreds of thousands of homes receive loft and cavity wall insulation from the spring. Households that don't currently get support to upgrade their homes will be prioritised, whilst a fifth of the funding will be set aside for the most vulnerable. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2029 and €1.1586. The price of gold is £1,450 and 27 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed at 7,747 points.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Right now, Tony Blair's Institute for Global Change is urging Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to revisit the Brexit trade deal that has already been agreed with the European Union. The think tank said that it was time to consider ways to improve on the trade and cooperation agreement, which is due for review at the end of 2025. I thought this would all get you going. I saw this story this morning and I thought, you know what? Maybe you guys really think that now we should have some form of renegotiation, or actually is this just, you know, Tony Blair being Tony Blair and trying to drag us kicking and screaming into something else that we never asked for? It comes as new analysis reveal that UK export growth has fallen behind that of other major economies, including Germany and France, despite claims by the Conservative government that Brexit would boost business overseas. I want to talk now to Marco Vincenzino, who's a geopolitical analyst and an incredibly suave chap, clearly. Marco, thank you very much. Do you think that Tony Blair is right and we should have closer cooperation with the European Union, or should Tony Blair shut up and go away?
So Tony Blair is an international brand name. Anything that he says will make major headlines, particularly whether it's from himself or from his institute. The bottom line is that many in the media will be sympathetic to him, to his conclusions of that report. But there's the political realities on the ground. The political reality on the ground is that Brexit is moving forward. It's going to take time. It took years in the making to reach the Brexit referendum, and it's going to take years for the implementation. So as this ongoing process, there's going to be ups and downs. So only time will tell. And I think it's the responsibility of all the political leaders whether it's the Conservatives and the Tories, one second, it's important for them to make clear in the most unequivocal terms that the process is moving forward, because we're living in very unstable times. And if they allow any room for this type of chatter to become more and more prevalent, what happens is that the unstable further destabilizes the unstable status quo. And this uncertainty is going to remain for years. So that's why political leadership is important, elected officials, to make it clear where things are heading.
Yes, indeed. Now, since the actual evening of that Brexit vote, we had years of indecision, dither, delay, catastrophe, capitulation. Then finally we got something that looked like a Brexit deal. Then we were slammed straight into a global pandemic. But since all of that, we've then had a war in Ukraine. We've had a Channel migrant crisis that is not going away. We've had net migration in record levels. And then on top of that, we looks like our exports aren't doing particularly well. Rather unfortunately, it appears to be building a case that Brexit has not really worked or had the intended consequences. But do you think that's unfair? Because it's not really been given the opportunity to work yet, has it?
Once again, I'll use those words, ongoing process. It'll take years. And at the early stages of that implementation, there's been everything that you mentioned, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine. It's been like the perfect storm of all the worst possible factors that can happen. So it's basically, as this perfect storm is unfolding, you're trying to implement the Brexit process, which even complicates it even more. So I think at this stage, it has to be made clear by the political leadership in the country of where things are heading. Any kind of chatter of trying to reverse the process is only going to further create uncertainty in a very uncertain environment. So yes, it's going to take, and we're talking several years. We're not talking the next 2 to 3 years. This is an ongoing process. It's sort of an experimentation to a certain extent, whether one supports or one was for Brexit or against Brexit. It's important to have that clarity from the political establishment, not just from the governing party, but also from the opposition.
OK, all right. Marco, I think there's just a bit of an issue there with your connection, unfortunately, but thank you very, very much. It's great to have you on the show. We did manage to get all of that. Marco Vincenzino, who is a geopolitical analyst. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Look, I just want to talk to you and move on now to something else that we have been covering throughout the course of this show. Conservative former Cabinet Minister David Davies has accused the Home Office of having a laissez-faire approach to asylum seeker dispersal, which he argued was at odds with the government, saying that it had serious concern for public health. Right, now, we've got absolutely loads to get stuck into here, which we will do right now, because there is a crisis in the Channel when it comes to these sheer numbers of people coming over. And we've already reported, it was live breaking news here on this show. We had 450 people coming over today in 9 not-so-small boats, OK? So that happened. That was after about a fortnight's worth of a lull due to weather conditions. So we've got the numbers issue. Now, we've also had another bit of breaking that came through on this show. 50 cases of diphtheria detected at asylum accommodation. And massive concern now about the fact that these people, many of these people, might have just been dispersed right across the European Union, across the United Kingdom, I should say. People who are in little areas around the UK who maybe had concerns about what was going on in the Channel for a long time were just told that actually you're a closet racist and you're wrong about this. And let's just have a look at it, shall we, and break it down. Record numbers of people crossing the Channel, more than 42,000 people so far this year. A lot of people were looking at these boats coming across and thinking, why is it all single men? Do all of these people look just outwardly as though they are fleeing a war zone in Syria or Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East? Do all of them really look like children? And to all of those people, the answer to all of those things was no. We were told, oh, come on, you're a racist. These people are genuinely fleeing persecution. And then the numbers come out, don't they? As the sheer number of people who are coming from Albania, which is a safe country agreed to be a safe country now by both Labour and the Conservatives. And it's emerged now that a lot of these people are not children. And it's emerged now that a lot of these people are actually coming here to get involved in organised crime and not really to seek asylum. And then it's emerged, on top of that, that they're having their asylum case rejected and they're clogging up our system by saying they're the victims of human trafficking and modern slavery. Well, if you're the victim of modern slavery, presumably you won't have any problem going back to where you originally didn't want to be taken away from. No. And then people went, just quickly on this, people went, well, I've got a little bit of a problem with a migrant hotel in my area. What about safety, both of the people in the hotel and in the surrounding area. Well, we've had cases of, allegedly, a teenage boy being raped in a migrant hotel. We've had cases, as has been revealed, of children going missing from migrant hotels and people absconding. And now we've got this health crisis taking place, which is supposedly, anyway, around 50 cases of diphtheria in migrant accommodation, and now they've been sent out around the United Kingdom. And all of a sudden, I think people are waking up to actually what we are seeing before our eyes is actually happening, and those people cannot now call us just, you know, I suppose, little frothing racists with an agenda when we're actually got an opinion about what is realistically happening before our eyes. I mean, it's absolutely staggering that we're ever in that situation, really. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But in case it sounded like I was filling for time, there I was, because we can now go to Stephen Wolfe, who is the Director Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, right, you are concerned with the lack of screening for people and the threat that this poses communities. And this is straight off the back, rather conveniently, in a morbid sense, really, of Robert Jenrick revealing, whilst I was on air, that there's been 50 cases of diphtheria at migrant processing centres. Those people now presumably out and about across the UK.
Absolutely, Patrick. You've got it knocked on the head when people were saying that we were racist for raising the issue that all these illegal migrants and asylum seekers coming across from Afghanistan, Syria, top countries of Pakistan, Iran and Iraq, that they would be bringing diseases with them. And now we can see that we've got diphtheria, that 50 cases, as Robert Jenrick said, somebody already died. But my concern was that we were aware of this from the 27th of August 2021, as I released today a letter that was confidential, supposedly secret, but sent out to all the heads of the NHS trusts, all the doctors at the NHS trusts, all the heads of the NHS nurses at those trusts, warning them that these people would be bringing in TB, diphtheria, and a number of other communicable diseases. So the government has been aware of this for over a year.
Now, a lot of people say the first duty of a government is to protect its own citizens at all costs. I've got huge concerns about just general public safety when it comes to people who we don't know exactly who they are or where they're from or what their intentions are, being allowed out across the United Kingdom and allowed to come and go, concerningly go, really, from these hotels. And on top of that, we have health concerns now. And so the government, it could be argued, is letting us down on two fronts, safety and health.
Oh, well, there's no doubt they've been letting us down now. They're letting us down on the health, because we've seen that from those letters in August of last year and what we're seeing now with the diphtheria cases. We know they're letting us down on security because Europol and our own security services have warned us about the increase of Albanian criminal gangs in the cocaine, marijuana, illegal trafficking of people's areas. We know that there are those sneaking through into other areas. We don't even know whether there are any terrorists out there as well. The fact that we're letting them in, not checking them, monitoring them and continually seeing where they are is a danger to our security now.
Yeah, no, OK, fair enough. The government has come out and said that these cases are low. The risk to public safety is low and, right, fine. And there are high levels of inoculation amongst our population. But people in my inbox, I can see the emails coming in right now, raising concerns about, you know, newborn babies or other people who've come from other countries, legally, may I add, who have moved over here and, you know, maybe not had a diphtheria vaccine in their lifetime. Just the concern generally, really, frankly, is I think is perfectly justified that there is an additional health risk being introduced into our society. However minor, any is too much. But now we've seen 50 Conservative MPs finally wake up and smell the coffee and go, actually, Rishi, it's a little bit rum what's going on. Well, you've just opened a migrant hotel in my backyard and my constituents have started to get a bit leery about the whole thing and I'm now worried about my job. So I'm going to write to you and say that we don't think this is right. And they've been taking the mickey when it comes to our laws because people have been refused asylum on the grounds of the fact that Albania is a safe country, and then they've gone, right, well, OK, we've been trafficked here. It's human trafficking. It's modern slavery. But now David Davis and co might finally have hit the nail on the head, which is, all right, if you were brought here due to modern slavery, we'll do you a favour then and send you back to that country that you allegedly didn't want to leave in the first place. Do you think that's right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've been caught by their own petard there, haven't they? Really, they can't have it both ways. They can't say that I've escaped modern slavery in Albania and to be a slave in the UK working for these gangs. So let's send them home. But this is just one of those classic lines that are used by the immigration industry that allows them to make claims under the European Court of Human Rights requirements for them to stay and be granted protection in this country. They're not falling under the rules of the Refugee Convention. So they're trying to find another sneaky way of getting in, and this is it. And that is why Suella Braverman has to be very brave and remove ourselves from the European Court of Human Rights, start restricting the Modern Slavery Act regulations to what they were meant to be, dealing with true slaves, not faux slaves. And that's one way of dealing with these real important cases of getting migration down from illegal immigrants.
But isn't it absolutely fascinating? People say that there's absolutely no truth to the fact that a load of lefty lawyers are raking it in off the migrant crisis. Well, I'm sorry, but these people aren't getting legal advice from themselves, are they? And they're here for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden they manage to know the asylum system inside out. And as David Davies said, and I commend him for doing this, by the way, I commend him for doing this, he also said if they are here for a couple of years, you often find that they go and have kids here, for example, and it makes it less likely that they are going to be deported. But have we now found an actual silver bullet, and one that should have been used earlier on, which is pretty straightforward, Stephen? If you are saying that you've been dragged here against your will and we are offering you the chance to go home and you don't take that and you've been refused asylum, you have to just admit that you are an illegal immigrant, don't you?
Well, I think the rules are that everyone is an illegal immigrant that comes into the country without a proper reason for doing so or a proper visa. The rules change when you make an application for asylum. And only until that point that you've been granted asylum do you become a legal immigrant under that particular route. So it's absolutely perfectly acceptable for them to be sent back.
Yeah, just quickly, sorry, as well, one thing I did want to ask you, which I nearly forgot about, which is apparently one of the signatories to this letter, 50 Tory MPs writing to Rishi Sunak to say, look, we've had enough of this, Rishi, please, you know, get the deportations on the go, was Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the Backbench 1922 committee. Now, if he's getting involved, it implies that he feels as though the future of the Conservative Party at the next general election rides on this, because he normally keeps his trap shut with this stuff. If he's got involved, that shows how serious the backbenchers are now taking it, does it not?
It does, but it also means that he's actually seeing hotels being used in Cheshire, which is one of the areas next to where he is, and now being filled. The Manchester ones are full up. Now the really lovely four-star hotels in Cheshire are being offered huge sums of money by the Home Office, and that's going to impact his particular votes.
OK, all right. Well, look, Stephen, thank you very, very much. Stephen Wolfe there, who is director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, just reacting there to, frankly, a bumper package of news when it comes to the Channel migrant crossings so far today. We had it live on this show, didn't we? The 450 people in 9 not-so-small boats have made the journey today alone. One would imagine that number may well have risen in the time that I've been on air. It also was announced, the other breaking news, that 50 cases of diphtheria at migrant detention centres. Where are those people now? People correct in having public health concerns. Have these people been dispersed around the area? And also on top of that as well, the news that 50 Tory MPs have now finally written, including, as we understand it, the chairman of the Backbench Conservative 1922 committee, Graham Brady, Sir Graham Brady, to say, Rishi, we've had enough of this now. You need to get a change in the law that would mean that people cannot claim modern slavery. If they do claim modern slavery, we do them a favour and get them sent back to where they allegedly did not want to be removed from anyway. We're going to take a very quick break now, but when I come back, a little bit more on Matt Hancock, the man himself. Do you think his public image has been rehabilitated? Get your views coming in. GBViews at gbnews.uk. I will be back very, very shortly.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
I, for one, am very glad that we are just moments away from our last ever, hopefully, conversation about Matt Hancock being in the jungle. But let's see it off, people, OK? So former Lioness Jill Scott may have been crowned Queen of the Jungle last night, with Hollyoaks star Owen Warner coming second, but it could be argued that Tory MP Matt Hancock was, believe it or not, the real winner of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, because at the start of the series, many, myself included, predicted that little Matty Hancock would be the first out, but he avoided elimination after elimination, and then the momentum started to build. You saw him eating a hippo's backside, camels, can't use alliteration there, but you get my drift. And he obviously did something right, as the MP managed to come third, which is an absolutely stellar effort, because it went beyond people voting for him to do horrible challenges. We then got to a stage where people went, oh, actually, I think he's had enough and he might be being bullied, so they were just keeping him in. And then people started voting for him to actually win the flipping thing. So, really, he's come full circle, but he's had the Tory whip removed and said that he'll donate part of his £400,000 fee to charity. And that's going to be in his constituency, which he obviously deserted in order to go and rake it in the jungle. But what next for him now? Let's talk to Christian Calgie, who's senior reporter at Guido Fawkes. Christian, you are an avid fan of, well, particularly this year's I'm a Celebrity. I'm going to hold my hands up, Christian, just full disclosure, cards on the table. I remain unconvinced that Matt Hancock should have been given the opportunity at a public rehabilitation. However, he was, and we are where we are. He is clearly an incredibly intelligent man and knew exactly what he was doing, went into it his eyes wide open and exceeded public perception. But politically, is he now dead in the water?
Well, I think he was dead in the water before he went on the show, and that's why he did it. I mean, I remember famously during a meeting with backbenchers while Liz Truss was still Prime Minister, had been very publicly lobbying for a job, and that didn't happen. And then obviously had been quite a supporter of Rishi Sunak's campaign to be PM, wanted a job, and that didn't happen. And I think really that was the moment that he decided, right, I've been Health Secretary, I'm not back in government even when my mate's the Prime Minister. So now I think it's time to go and try this new career.
Well, it has been said before, and I think Grant Shapps alluded to it before, politics is showbiz for ugly people. Is Matt Hancock now just in showbiz?
I think he'd like to be. If we hear reports today are correct, I mean, that this morning the Sun reported that his Mrs. Gina Coladangelo has been approaching PR agents on his behalf, and I wouldn't be surprised if he left his seat at the next election, but maybe even sooner. I mean, today we also learned that obviously he's got a book coming out, which he did mention on the show. We understand that he's sold the serialization rights of that book to the Mail for quite a hefty sum. So in a way, you know, you've got to remember that even though he's promised to donate a large part of his $400,000 fee for appearing on I'm a Celebrity, in many ways he'll see that as a down payment on trying to levy future sums out of a media career. And,
yeah, exactly.
You know, look, I'm sure he's thinking about figures like Michael Portillo of GB News family, and of course also Ed Balls, who have managed to put politics behind them.
But there's a difference. But there is a difference, Christian, because there's the question of death, right, which does not surround Portillo or Ed Balls, no matter what the smell is, no. It's just to do with Matt Hancock, right, in terms of the care home stuff, the PPE stuff, people not being allowed to see dying relatives. Has he been, whatever the equivalent of sports washing is, has he been reality TV washed here, do you think? And was that right?
I think that was partly his consideration. I mean, there was a poll out this afternoon, it was a YouGov poll that showed about 40% of the public, their opinion was negative going into the jungle and is still negative. And I think it's about 17% say their opinion of Matt Hancock's improved. So, do you know what? For a politician going into the jungle to have actually had an improvement, not a bad performance, especially given the context of Matt. But that's still, let's be honest, not good enough, is it, for a proper media career coming up? So, I'm not that positive for him.
All right, Christine, look, thank you very, very much. Christine Calgie there, senior reporter at Guido Fawkes. Now, up next is Jubes and Co. Michelle Dewberry joins me now. She's back from a wonderful holiday. You've got about 10 seconds to summarise everything you've got coming up.
Oh, I was looking forward to telling you all about my holiday then, but I can't. If I've only got 10 seconds, I'll tell you about that afterwards. Coming up on my show tonight, Patrick, what's going on in China, this whole zero COVID thing? Should the UK get involved in trying to make them pack it in when it comes to their human rights abuses or not? Net zero, should we have a referendum on all of this, yes or no? And private schools, Keir Starmer wants them to stop being charities. Is that politics of envy or good old common sense?
Oh, there we go. Right, Jubes, thank you very much. Michelle Dewberry will join you for the next hour. I've been Patrick Christys. I will be back again for another Rip Roarer, 3 p.m. tomorrow, all the way through until 6 p.m. I now am about to put a tux on and go to the British Curry Awards. Get in.
Hello, a very good afternoon to you. It's a different side of autumn that we'll see this week. Fog, low cloud, some frost as well. Showers are now easing across western parts of the UK, and really it's turning drier everywhere during the next few days, but still some showers about in the far west of Wales, Cornwall, into the southeast of England overnight. They're the exception. For many places it's dry with clear spells. Areas of low cloud across central and eastern England will prevent frost and fog from forming here, but elsewhere fairly widespread frost. Temperatures down to -3 or -4 Celsius first thing across shelter parts of northern and western UK, and some dense fog patches about first thing as well, for example through the central belt into northwest England, parts of Wales. Some of these fog patches could linger into the afternoon, and we've also got this extensive area of low cloud and mist across central and eastern areas. Where we've got low cloud and fog, it's going to feel chilly. Temperatures in the mid-single figures at best. Where we've got some sunshine coming through, western and northern parts of the UK, 9 to 12 Celsius, with light winds, pleasant enough. 1 or 2 showers could affect parts of Kent during Tuesday. Otherwise, for